Hello everyone, and welcome back to the Horror Halloween. Now I know a lot of you use these videos to sleep, so before you drift off, I thought it would be a fun idea if everyone can leave a comment to let me know where you're listening from in the world. Also like and subscribe if you are enjoying the episodes. I never thought my curiosity would lead me to something so dark and disturbing. I'm not even sure why I'm writing this down, but I need to get it out. Maybe someone will read this and think twice before diving into places they're not meant to go. It all started one night when I was bored out of my mind. I had just turned 18, and for some reason, I felt invincible. I'd heard people talk about the dark web, a hidden part of the internet where you could supposedly find anything. Drugs, weapons, illegal stuff. It sounded dangerous but thrilling. The idea of forbidden secrets was too tempting. So, I decided to check it out. I downloaded Tor, the browser everyone says you need to access the dark web. I followed a few tutorials online, setting up a VPN because, safety first. At first, it was underwhelming. Most of the sites didn't even load. The ones that did were just creepy forums and weird marketplaces. But then I found a link that caught my attention. It was called The Hidden Theater. The description said, "Not for the faint of heart. Watch if you dare." I hesitated for a second, but my curiosity was stronger than my caution. I clicked it. The site was simple. Just a black screen with a chat box on the side and a video player in the center. People in the chat were typing things like, "Started already," and "This one's supposed to be crazy." My stomach churned, but I stayed. A countdown appeared on the screen. 10, 9, 8. When the video started, it looked like someone filming with a cheap camera. The setting was an old, abandoned house. The kind you'd see in horror movies, with peeling wallpaper and broken furniture. The camera was shaky, like the person holding it was nervous or in a hurry. At first, it seemed harmless, just an empty house. Then, I heard it, a faint sound, like crying. The person filming moved towards the noise, down a dark hallway. My heart was pounding so loud I could barely hear anything else. The crying got louder. It sounded like a woman, but there was something off about it, almost like it wasn't entirely human. The camera turned a corner, and there she was, a woman sitting on the floor, her back to the camera. Her long, tangled hair covered her face, and she was rocking back and forth, mumbling something I couldn't understand. The person filming didn't say anything. They just stood there, breathing heavily. Then, the woman stopped rocking. She turned her head slightly, just enough to show part of her face. Her skin was pale, almost gray, and her eyes, they didn't look right. They were too wide, too dark, like black holes staring into the camera. She smiled, but it wasn't a normal smile. It was too big, stretching across her face like her skin was about to tear. Suddenly, she lunged at the camera. The screen went black for a second, and then it cut to a new scene. This time, it was outside. The camera was pointed at a large hole in the ground. It looked like a freshly dug grave. There was no sound, just the faint rustle of leaves in the wind. The camera zoomed in on the hole, and that's when I saw it. A hand, pale and lifeless, sticking out of the dirt. I slammed my laptop shut. My heart was racing, and I felt like I was going to throw up. What the hell had I just watched? I wanted to believe it was fake, some twisted horror project, but it felt too real, too raw. I tried to sleep that night, but every time I closed my eyes, I saw her face. That smile, those eyes. I decided I was done with the dark web. I deleted Tor, the VPN, everything. But it wasn't over. The next day, I got an email. It was from an address I didn't recognize. The subject line just said, "Did you like the show?" My blood turned to ice. I didn't open it. I deleted it and told myself it was just a coincidence. But the emails kept coming. Every day, a new message. "We're glad you watched. Come back soon. You can't leave." I blocked the address, but they still found me. New accounts, new messages. It was like they knew I couldn't escape. Then, one night, I heard something outside my window. A soft tapping sound. I froze. My room was on the second floor. There was no way anyone could be out there. Slowly, I turned to look, and there, pressed against the glass, was a hand. Pale and lifeless, like the one in the video. I screamed and ran out of my room, waking up my parents. By the time they checked, there was nothing there. No hand, no sign of anyone. They told me it was just a bad dream, but I knew better. I've since moved to a new house in a new town. I've changed my email, my phone number, everything. But sometimes, late at night, I hear a faint tapping sound, and I know they're still watching. I wish I could say I stumbled onto the dark web by accident, but that'd be a lie. I've always had this itch for the strange, the creepy, and the forbidden. It's like there's a part of me that craves the unknown, no matter how dangerous it might be. That's how I ended up where I did, and why I'll never go back. It started with a stupid dare. My friends and I were sitting in my basement, scrolling through YouTube videos about dark web horror stories. You know, the kind where people buy mystery boxes or hire hitmen as a joke. We were laughing about how fake it all seemed. Then Jake, always the thrill seeker, looked at me with a grin and said, "Why don't we check it out ourselves?" At first, I brushed it off. I knew the dark web was no joke, but the idea lingered in my mind. By the time everyone left that night, I had already downloaded Tor. I told myself I'd just take a quick peek. Nothing too crazy. But once I started, I couldn't stop. The first few sites I found were lame. Old forums, sketchy marketplaces, and links that led to nowhere. I was about to give up when I found a page called Hidden Frames. The tagline said, "See what the world's not meant to see." It sounded like some edgy art project, so I clicked the link. The site was plain, just a list of video titles with timestamps next to them. Most of the titles didn't make sense. Random numbers and letters, like X12-983 or FRM2-12. But one title caught my eye, A Girl in the Red Room. It had a timestamp of only 3 minutes and 22 seconds. Something about it made my skin crawl, but I clicked anyway. The video started in a small, dimly lit room. The walls were painted red, and the only furniture was a wooden chair in the center. Sitting in the chair was a girl, maybe my age, with long black hair that covered most of her face. She was wearing a white dress, but it looked old and tattered, like it hadn't been washed in years. For the first minute, she just sat there, completely still. Then, slowly, she looked up. Her face. I can't even describe it. It was like something was wrong with her eyes. They were too big, too dark, and when she blinked, it was almost like her eyelids didn't close all the way. Her lips started to move, but there was no sound, just silence. I felt like I was suffocating. I wanted to close the video, but I couldn't look away. At the 2-minute mark, she suddenly stood up. Her movements were jerky, like a puppet on strings. She walked toward the camera, her head tilting back and forth in unnatural angles. The closer she got, the more I could see her face. Her cracked skin, her crooked teeth, the way her neck seemed too long for her body. Then, she smiled. It wasn't a normal smile. It stretched across her face, almost ear to ear, revealing blackened gums and teeth that looked like they'd been filed to points. She reached out toward the camera, and just as her hand touched the lens, the screen went black. I sat there in stunned silence, my heart racing. But before I could process what I'd just seen, the video started again. This time, it was a different room. A kitchen, maybe. The camera was shaky, like someone was holding it while walking. It panned around, showing dirty dishes, rotting food, and a body. It was lying on the floor, partially covered by a sheet. Blood pooled around it, dark and sticky. That's when I heard the whispering. It wasn't coming from the video. It was coming from somewhere in my room. I whipped around, but I was alone. My heart felt like it was going to explode. I slammed my laptop shut and turned on every light in the house. I told myself it was just my imagination, that the video had messed with my head. But deep down, I knew something wasn't right. The next morning, I decided to delete everything. Tor, the browser history, all of it. But when I opened my laptop, the Hidden Frame site was already on the screen. I hadn't even turned it on yet, and there was a new video at the top of the list. It was titled You're Next. My hands were shaking as I clicked it. The video was a live feed of my bedroom. I could see myself sitting at the desk, staring at the screen. Behind me, the closet door was slightly open. I hadn't noticed it before, but now it was all I could see. My reflection on the screen looked frozen, terrified. And then, the door moved. I don't know how I managed to get out of there. I grabbed my keys and ran to my car, not even bothering to lock the door behind me. I drove to Jake's house and told him everything. At first, he thought I was joking, but the look on my face must have convinced him otherwise. We went back to my house together, but when we got there, everything was normal. No sight on my laptop, no videos, no open closet door. Jake laughed it off, saying I'd probably just fallen asleep and had a nightmare. I wanted to believe him, but I knew better. That night, I stayed at his place. I barely slept, jumping at every little sound. When I finally did drift off, I had the worst dream of my life. I was back in that red room, sitting in the chair. The girl was standing in front of me, her face inches from mine. She whispered something I couldn't understand, but I felt her words crawling under my skin, like bugs. When I woke up, there was a message on my phone. It was from an unknown number. All it said was, "You can't run. I've since gotten a new laptop, a new phone, even a new place to live. But it doesn't matter. The videos still find me. Sometimes they'll just appear on my screen, even when I'm not online. Other times, I'll hear her voice in the middle of the night, whispering from the shadows. I've tried everything to make it stop. Priests, therapists, even hackers. But no one can help me. The dark web doesn't let you leave. Once you've seen what you're not supposed to, it's already too late. So, if you're reading this, take my advice. Stay away from the dark web. No matter how curious you are, no matter how bored you feel, some doors aren't meant to be opened. And once you step inside, there's no going back." It's been months since it happened, but I still can't get the images out of my head. Every time I close my eyes, I see flashes of it. The dim room, the flickering light, and the face staring back at me. Maybe writing this down will help me make sense of it, though I'm not sure anything can. I wasn't looking for trouble. I was just another bored college kid, procrastinating on assignments and scrolling through random forums. That's when I stumbled across a thread about the dark web. Most of the posts were the usual urban legends: hitmen, red rooms, illegal marketplaces. I thought it was all exaggerated, but then I saw a comment that caught my attention. It just said, "Check out the gray door." If you're brave enough, there was a link beneath it. I hovered over it for a long time, debating. My curiosity won. After setting up Tor and a VPN, I clicked the link. The page was unsettlingly simple. A gray background with a single line of text in the center. Enter at your own risk. Below it was a button labeled, "Open the door." I hesitated, my pulse quickening, but I clicked. The screen went black for a few seconds before a video player loaded. It wasn't live, but it felt immediate, like it was meant just for me. The video began in a room that looked like a basement. The walls were concrete, and a single, dim bulb swung from the ceiling. The camera was stationary, focused on a wooden table in the middle of the room. On the table was an old CRT television, the kind you'd find at a thrift store. For a while, nothing happened, just the sound of static. Then, the TV on the screen flickered to life. It showed a different room, also dimly lit. There was a chair in the center, and someone was sitting in it. A man. His head was slumped forward, and his hands were tied behind his back. I couldn't see his face, but his body twitched slightly, like he was trying to move. Suddenly, the screen on the TV zoomed in, focusing on the man's face. He looked terrified. His eyes were wide, darting around as if searching for something or someone. He tried to speak, but his voice was muffled, like he was gagged. Then, out of nowhere, a figure stepped into the frame. The figure was wearing a mask. It was a blank white mask, completely featureless except for two small holes for the eyes. They were dressed in black from head to toe, and they moved with an unsettling calmness. The masked person reached out and placed something on the man's lap, a knife. They didn't say a word, just stood there, watching. I felt a chill run down my spine. My instinct screamed at me to close the browser, to shut it all down, but I couldn't move. It was like I was paralyzed, trapped by the unfolding scene. The man in the chair began shaking his head frantically, his muffled cries growing louder. The masked figure tilted their head, as if studying him, before turning to face the camera. That's when I realized something was very wrong. They weren't looking at the camera in the video. They were looking at me. My stomach dropped. I slammed my laptop shut and pushed it away. My heart was racing, and I felt like I couldn't breathe. What the hell had I just seen? I told myself it was some sick prank, a pre-recorded video designed to scare curious idiots like me. But deep down, I wasn't so sure. I tried to forget about it, but it didn't stop. Over the next few days, strange things started happening. My laptop would turn on by itself, displaying the same gray screen with the words, "Enter at your own risk." No matter how many times I deleted my browser or reset my settings, it would always come back. Then, the emails started. They came from an address that didn't make sense, just random letters and numbers. The subject lines were vague, like, "Do you understand now?" or "You can't escape." I didn't dare open them. I was too scared. One night, I woke up to a noise outside my window. It was a soft tapping, rhythmic and deliberate. I live on the second floor, so there was no way anyone could be out there. But when I looked, I saw something that made my blood run cold. A white mask staring at me through the glass. I screamed and ran to turn on every light in the house. When I looked back, the mask was gone. My roommates woke up and asked what was wrong, but I couldn't explain. How could I? They'd think I was losing my mind. The next day, I decided to leave. I packed a bag and drove to my parents' house, hoping the distance would make it stop. For a while, it seemed like it worked. No strange emails, no tapping at the window. I started to think maybe I'd imagined it all, that my mind had been playing tricks on me. But then, late one night, my phone buzzed. It was a text from an unknown number. The message was just a link. I knew better than to click it, but my hands moved on their own, driven by a mix of fear and curiosity. The link opened to a live video feed. It was my parents' house, the view from outside the front door. I could see myself through the window, sitting at the kitchen table with my phone in my hand. Then, the camera panned, and I saw them. The figure in the mask, standing in the shadows just beyond the porch light. I froze. My body refused to move, even as every instinct screamed at me to run. The figure raised a hand and pointed at the door. A second later, there was a knock. 3 slow, deliberate knocks. That was the last thing I remember before everything went black. When I woke up, I was in my bed. My parents said they found me passed out on the kitchen floor, my phone shattered beside me. They thought I'd had a panic attack, maybe from stress or lack of sleep. I wanted to tell them the truth, but I didn't. How could I explain something that didn't make sense, even to me? Since then, I've tried to move on. I got a new phone, a new laptop, and I avoid anything even remotely related to the dark web. But I can still feel it, like a shadow lurking just out of sight. Sometimes, I'll catch glimpses of the mask in reflections, or hear faint tapping at the window when I'm alone. I don't know what they want, or why they chose me. But one thing is clear. Once you open the door, it never really closes. I'll never forget the night I stumbled upon the video that changed everything. At first, it was just another uneventful evening. I was home alone, scrolling through random forums and trying to distract myself from the monotony of my day. That's when I found a thread titled, "The Unseen Vault Videos They Don't Want You to See." The title was vague, but intriguing. Most of the replies were jokes, people daring each other to check it out. One comment, however, stood out. It read, "If you value your sanity, don't click the link. Some things can't be unseen." Naturally, I clicked. The page I landed on was unsettlingly basic. Just a black background with white text that read, "Welcome to the Unseen Vault. Proceed with caution." Below it was a single link labeled Hidden Videos. My curiosity got the better of me, and before I knew it, I was downloading Tor and setting up a VPN to access the site. The Hidden Videos page was a grid of thumbnails. Most were too dark or blurry to make out, but one caught my eye. It was titled Room 731, and the thumbnail showed a dimly lit hallway with a single door at the end. Something about it gave me chills, but I clicked anyway. The video started with shaky footage, like it was filmed on an old handheld camera. The person holding it was walking down a narrow hallway with peeling wallpaper and flickering lights. The audio was muffled, but I could hear faint whispers, like distant voices overlapping. The camera stopped in front of a door with the number 731 etched into the wood. For a moment, nothing happened. The camera lingered on the door, the whispers growing louder. Then, the person filming reached out and turned the knob. The door creaked open, revealing a small room with no windows. In the center was a single chair, and sitting in it was a figure covered in a white sheet. I leaned closer to my screen, trying to make sense of what I was seeing. The figure under the sheet wasn't moving. The person filming didn't say anything, just stood there, breathing heavily. Then, without warning, the figure under the sheet twitched. I jumped in my chair, my heart racing. The camera moved closer, slowly circling the chair. As it did, the whispers grew louder, almost like they were coming from the figure itself. Suddenly, the sheet fell to the floor, revealing an old mannequin with cracked skin and empty eye sockets. I let out a nervous laugh, feeling foolish for being so scared. But then the camera panned up, and I froze. Standing in the corner of the room was a shadowy figure. It was tall and thin, its face obscured by darkness. The camera zoomed in, but the figure didn't move. It just stood there, watching. Then, the screen went black. I sat there in silence, my heart pounding. The video hadn't been particularly graphic or gory, but something about it felt deeply wrong. I told myself it was just a creepy art project, some avant-garde attempt to scare people. But as I closed the browser and shut my laptop, I couldn't shake the feeling that I'd made a mistake. That night, I had trouble sleeping. Every time I closed my eyes, I saw that shadowy figure standing in the corner. At some point, I must have drifted off because I woke up to the sound of my phone buzzing. It was a notification from an unknown number. The message was short and chilling. "Do you like being watched?" I stared at the screen, my hands trembling. Before I could process what was happening, another message came through. It was a video file. Against my better judgment, I opened it. The video was a live feed of my bedroom. I could see myself, sitting on the bed, staring at my phone. My blood ran cold. I looked around the room, but it was empty. Then, on the screen, I saw the closet door behind me slowly creak open. I dropped my phone and ran out of the room, my heart pounding so hard I thought it might burst. I didn't stop until I was outside, standing barefoot on the cold pavement. I called a friend and begged to stay at their place for the night. Thankfully, they didn't ask too many questions. The next day, I returned home to find my bedroom exactly as I'd left it. The closet door was shut, and there was no sign of anyone having been there. I wanted to believe it had all been a bad dream, but the messages on my phone were still there, as was the video. I deleted everything and resolved never to speak of it again. For a while, things seemed normal. I avoided the dark web and tried to move on with my life. But the nightmares didn't stop. I kept dreaming of that hallway, that room, and the shadowy figure. Sometimes, I'd wake up in the middle of the night, convinced I wasn't alone. Then, a few weeks later, I got an email. The subject line read, "Room 731. The body of the email was blank, except for an attachment. My curiosity warred with my fear, but eventually, I clicked on it. It was another video. This one was different. The footage was static at first, but it eventually cleared to show a darkened living room. My living room. The camera was shaky, like someone was holding it while walking through my house. I felt sick as I watched the video pan over my belongings, lingering on family photos and personal items. Then, the camera turned toward the hallway leading to my bedroom. The whispers started again, growing louder as the camera moved closer. It stopped outside my bedroom door, which was slightly ajar. The camera pushed the door open, revealing me, asleep in bed. The video ended there. I didn't sleep that night. I stayed up, clutching a kitchen knife and jumping at every sound. By morning, I'd made up my mind. I packed a bag and left town, moving in with a relative several states away. I changed my number, got a new laptop, and cut ties with anyone who might have known about my encounter with the dark web. But it didn't matter. The videos followed me. They'd appear on my new devices, sometimes in emails, other times in pop-up windows. Each one was more unsettling than the last. They showed me going about my day, cooking, working, even sleeping. The shadowy figure was always there, lurking in the background, just out of focus. I don't know who's behind this or why they're targeting me. All I know is that I can't escape. The dark web isn't just a place. It's a trap, and once you step into it, it never lets you go. So, if you're reading this, consider it a warning. Stay away from the dark web. Don't let curiosity get the better of you. Some doors are meant to stay closed, and once you open them, you might not like what's on the other side. They say the dark web is like the ocean, vast, uncharted, and filled with shadows best left undisturbed. I didn't believe in any of the horror stories at first. I thought they were just campfire tales for the internet age. But that was before I found the black window. It started on a typical night. I was scrolling through Reddit, hopping between subreddits about cryptids and unsolved mysteries. I came across a thread titled, "Websites You'll Regret Visiting." Most of the replies were the usual suspects: scary shock sites, forums full of trolls, and links to supposedly cursed pages. But one reply stood out. It was short, direct, and chilling. Don't open the black window. Just don't. Of course, curiosity got the better of me. I spent the next hour trying to find it. Every lead I followed was a dead end, until I stumbled across an obscure forum post. It included detailed instructions on accessing the site. You need Tor, a VPN, and the will to see what lies beyond. Beneath that was a cryptic link. I hesitated, but only for a moment. I had no idea I was about to make the worst mistake of my life. The black window wasn't what I expected. No flashy graphics, no eerie music. Just a plain black screen with a single sentence in white text. What do you want to see? Below it was a search bar. I stared at the screen, unsure what to type. Finally, I entered hidden videos. For a moment, nothing happened. Then the screen flickered, and a list of video titles appeared. Most of them were gibberish, random strings of letters and numbers. But one title caught my eye, The Observer. I clicked it. The video started in darkness. I could hear faint breathing, uneven and shallow. The camera slowly adjusted, revealing what looked like a basement. The walls were lined with shelves filled with old VHS tapes, dusty and forgotten. The only source of light was a single bulb hanging from the ceiling, casting eerie shadows. In the center of the room was a chair, and in that chair sat a man. His head was slumped forward, and his hands were tied behind him. The camera zoomed in on his face. He looked terrified, his eyes darting around as if searching for something unseen. Then the whisper started. It was faint at first, almost like static, but as the camera panned to the shelves, the whispers grew louder. They weren't words, exactly. More like a chorus of voices, overlapping and dissonant. My skin crawled as the camera moved back to the man in the chair. He began to tremble. The whispers seemed to grow louder, angrier. Suddenly, the man's head snapped up, and he stared directly into the camera. His eyes were wide, unblinking, and his mouth opened as if to scream. But no sound came out. The screen went black. I sat frozen in my chair, my heart pounding. Then, text appeared on the screen. "You are now being observed." I closed the browser immediately. My hands were shaking, and I felt like I couldn't breathe. I told myself it was just a scare tactic, some elaborate hoax. But then my phone buzzed. The notification was from an unknown number. The message was a single image, my own face, staring at the screen, frozen in fear. The background was my room. My blood turned to ice. I spun around, half expecting to see someone standing there. But I was alone. The only sound was the faint hum of my computer. I grabbed my phone and deleted the message, but another one came almost immediately. This time, it was a video. I hesitated, my thumb hovering over the screen, before finally opening it. It was live footage of my room, filmed from the corner near the ceiling. I could see myself in real time, holding my phone, staring at the screen, my breath caught in my throat. I looked up at the corner where the camera should have been, but there was nothing there. Panic set in. I shut off my computer, turned off my phone, and sat in the dark, trying to calm my racing thoughts. But the feeling of being watched didn't go away. Every shadow in the room seemed to move. Every creak of the house made my skin crawl. The next morning, I decided to leave town. I packed a bag and drove to my parents' house a few hours away. For a few days, things seemed normal. I convinced myself it had all been a bad dream. a result of too much time online and not enough sleep. But then, the emails started. The first one was simple. "You can't run." The second was a video file. Against my better judgment, I opened it. It was footage of my parents' house, filmed from outside. The camera lingered on the windows, zooming in on the living room where I was sitting. The timestamp on the video was from that very moment. I shut my laptop and called the police. They searched the area but found nothing. No signs of anyone watching the house, no evidence of a break-in. They told me it was probably a prank, maybe a hacker trying to scare me. But I knew better. That night, I couldn't sleep. I kept checking the windows, expecting to see someone staring back at me. Around 3 a.m., my phone buzzed again. Another video file. This time, I didn't open it. I threw my phone across the room and sat in silence, my back pressed against the wall, clutching a kitchen knife. The next day, I bought a new phone, a new laptop, even a new router. I deleted every account I'd ever made and tried to erase any trace of my online presence. But it didn't matter. The messages kept coming. No matter what I did, they always found me. The videos became more personal, more invasive. They showed me sleeping, eating, even talking to my parents. In every clip, there was a shadowy figure in the background, always just out of focus. I started to see it in real life too, in reflections, in the corner of my eye, in my dreams. I've since moved again, this time to a remote cabin with no internet access. I've cut myself off from the world, hoping to escape whatever I unleashed that night. But deep down, I know it's only a matter of time. The dark web isn't just a place, it's a doorway. And once you open it, something on the other side opens it too. So, if you're reading this, take my advice, don't go looking for the black window. Some things are meant to stay hidden, and some doors should never be opened. It's strange how a simple decision can change your entire life. One click, one choice, and everything you thought you knew about the world shatters. That's what happened to me when I discovered the Echo Room. It began on a rainy Friday night. I was home alone, scrolling through forums dedicated to urban legends and creepy internet mysteries. My favorite thread was one about unexplained videos, the kind that vanish without a trace after being uploaded. Most were easily debunked, but one post caught my eye. It was from a user named Silent Observer, and all it said was, "If you're looking for something truly disturbing, search for the Echo Room. But be warned, you won't be able to forget it." I'd heard about the dark web before, of course. I knew it was where people went to find the forbidden, the illegal, the dangerous. But I'd never been there myself. The idea of diving into that shadowy corner of the internet both thrilled and terrified me. I spent hours researching how to access it. By the time I downloaded Tor and set up a VPN, it was well past midnight. My heart raced as I typed "the Echo Room" into the search bar. At first, nothing came up, just dead links and cryptic forums. Then, I found it, a plain black site with a single phrase in white text. "Enter the Echo." There was no context, no explanation, just a button that said, "Proceed." Against my better judgment, I clicked it. The screen went black for a moment before a video player appeared. The title at the top of the screen read, "Entry Log 001. The video began with a shaky handheld shot of a dark hallway. The walls were lined with mirrors, each one slightly cracked. The person filming didn't speak. All I could hear was their breathing, shallow and uneven. As they moved down the hallway, the mirrors seemed to shift. At first, I thought it was just the poor quality of the video, but then I noticed the reflections. They didn't match the movements of the camera. Instead, they moved independently, their faces twisted into strange, unnatural expressions. Some of them even seemed to be looking directly at me. I felt a chill crawl up my spine, but I couldn't look away. The camera reached the end of the hallway, where a single door stood ajar. A faint, rhythmic tapping sound came from the other side. The person filming hesitated before pushing the door open. Inside was a room, dimly lit by a flickering fluorescent bulb. The walls were bare, except for one large mirror that covered the entire far wall. In the center of the room stood a figure, their back to the camera. They were tall and unnaturally thin, wearing what looked like a hospital gown. Their head tilted slightly to one side, as if listening to something. The camera slowly panned to the mirror. My breath caught in my throat. The figure's reflection wasn't facing away. It was staring directly at the camera. The screen went black. For a moment, I just sat there, my heart pounding. I told myself it was just a video, some creepy project designed to scare people. But then, a new message appeared on the screen. Log 002 will begin shortly. Before I could react, the next video started. This one was different. The camera was in a room that looked eerily familiar. My room. I could see my bed, my desk, even the cup of coffee I'd left on the nightstand. The camera panned slowly, as if someone was walking through the space, taking their time. I froze. My laptop was the only light in the room, casting shadows on the walls. I glanced around, but I was alone. At least, I thought I was. The video continued, the camera moving closer to my desk. It stopped in front of my laptop. On the screen, I could see myself, sitting there, staring in horror. Then, the whispers started. They were faint at first, like the rustling of leaves, but they grew louder, more distinct. Voices overlapping, repeating the same phrase over and over. "We see you." The video ended abruptly. My laptop screen went black, but the whispers didn't stop. They were coming from somewhere in the room. I slammed the laptop shut and backed away, my heart racing. The whispers faded, leaving only silence. I told myself it was a prank, that someone had hacked my computer. But deep down, I knew that wasn't true. Over the next few days, strange things started happening. I'd hear faint tapping sounds at night, coming from the walls. My phone would buzz with notifications from unknown numbers, each one a single phrase. Entry log, random number. Uploaded. I didn't dare open them. Then, one night, I woke up to find my laptop open on my desk. The screen was glowing. The words, Log 003, displayed in bold letters. I wanted to close it, to shut it down and pretend none of this was happening. But my curiosity won. The video was darker this time, harder to make out. The camera was in a new hallway, the walls covered in scratches and handprints. At the end of the hall was another door, slightly ajar. The person filming pushed it open, revealing a large, empty room. In the center of the room was a single chair, and on the chair was a mirror. The camera moved closer, and I realized the mirror wasn't reflecting the room. Instead, it showed scenes from my life. My childhood home, my high school graduation, my bedroom. The scenes moved in fast forward, flashing by like a warped home video. Then the mirror showed something else. It showed me, sitting at my desk, watching the video. But behind me, in the reflection, was a figure. The same tall, thin figure from the first video. Its head tilted, its dark eyes locked on me. I spun around, but there was no one there. When I looked back at the screen, the video had ended. My reflection stared back at me, wide-eyed and terrified. I haven't watched another log since that night. I've disconnected from the internet, changed my devices, even moved to a new apartment. But it doesn't matter. The echo room doesn't need the internet to find you. Sometimes, late at night, I hear the tapping on the walls. Sometimes, I catch glimpses of the tall figure in reflective surfaces. And sometimes, when I close my eyes, I hear the whispers, "We see you." The first thing you should know is that I wasn't looking for trouble. I wasn't one of those adrenaline junkies chasing dark web horror stories. No, I was just an average college student, pulling an all-nighter for a project I had no passion for. But as the hours dragged on, I found myself wandering through the depths of the internet, searching for anything to break the monotony. That's when I stumbled across the link to the watching wall. It was buried in a forgotten thread on a tech forum, a single comment left by an anonymous user. The message read, "For those brave enough to see what's hidden in plain sight, search for the watching wall. But be warned, the wall watches back." Something about it felt off, but also tempting. I had always been curious about the dark web, though I'd never dared to explore it. Until that night. Setting it up wasn't hard. Tor, a VPN, the usual steps. Within an hour, I was there. A stark black page with a single phrase in blood-red text. "What will you offer to see?" Beneath it was a text box, waiting for my input. I hesitated. What was I even supposed to offer? A joke? Maybe my sanity. I typed, then hit enter. For a moment, nothing happened. Then the text on the page shifted. Accepted. Welcome to the watching wall. A series of video thumbnails appeared, each one more disturbing than the last. The images were blurry, abstract, yet they radiated a sense of wrongness that made my skin crawl. One caught my eye. A video titled Room 404. Against my better judgment, I clicked. The video opened with a wide shot of a hotel room. It was dimly lit, with peeling wallpaper and a single flickering lamp. The camera was stationary, positioned in the corner, as if it were a hidden security feed. For several minutes, nothing happened. Just the hum of the fluorescent light and the occasional groan of the building settling. Then, the door opened. A man stepped inside. He looked disheveled, his clothes rumpled, his face pale. He walked to the bed and sat down, staring at the floor. Something about him felt wrong, like he wasn't supposed to be there. Maybe he wasn't supposed to exist at all. The man didn't move for a long time. Then, slowly, he looked up, directly at the camera. His eyes were empty, hollow, like they were made of glass. He opened his mouth as if to speak, but no sound came out. Instead, the walls behind him began to shift. I thought it was just the lighting at first, but no, the walls were moving. Shapes began to emerge, faces pressing out from the wallpaper, their features distorted and grotesque. Their mouths moved soundlessly, as if they were screaming. The man stood up and turned to face the wall. He raised his hands, pressing them against the faces, and they seemed to respond, writhing under his touch. Then he turned back to the camera, his lips curling into a smile that stretched too far, like his skin would split. The video ended abruptly. I stared at the blank screen, my heart racing. I told myself it was just a weird art project, some experimental horror meant to scare people. But then my laptop froze. The screen flickered, and new text appeared. You are now part of the wall. I slammed the laptop shut, my hands trembling. It wasn't real. It couldn't be real. I told myself it was just a scare tactic, a gimmick to mess with people. But that night, as I lay in bed, I felt it. A pressure on the walls around me, like something was watching from the other side. The next day, I tried to forget. I avoided my laptop, went to class, acted like everything was fine. But when I returned home, there was an email waiting for me. The sender's address was a random string of numbers and letters. The subject line simply said, 404. Against my better judgment, I opened it. The email contained a single image, a still frame from the video. It showed the man standing in the hotel room, his glassy eyes fixed on the camera. But there was something new in the picture. On the wall behind him was a face I recognized. It was mine. I felt sick. My head spun, and I nearly dropped my phone. I deleted the email, shut down my laptop, and disconnected it from the internet. But it didn't matter. The emails kept coming. Each one contained a new frame from the video, and in each frame, my face was clearer, more defined. It was like I was becoming part of the wall, just as the message had said. The tapping started a few days later. At first, it was faint, like the sound of branches brushing against the windows. But soon, it grew louder, more insistent. It wasn't random. It was rhythmic, deliberate, like someone was knocking from inside the walls. I called the landlord, thinking it was a pest problem. They checked the walls, the pipes, everything, but they found nothing. No signs of mice, no loose wiring, nothing that could explain the noise. That night, the tapping turned into whispers. I couldn't understand the words at first, but they grew clearer as the hours passed. They were calling my name. Soft, breathy voices, repeating it over and over. I covered my ears, blasted music through my headphones, but I could still hear them, as if they were inside my head. By the end of the week, I couldn't take it anymore. I packed a bag and left, moving in with a friend on the other side of town. For a while, things seemed normal. The tapping stopped, the whispers faded, and I started to believe I'd escaped. But then the videos started. They appeared on my new laptop, no matter how many times I wiped the hard drive or changed devices. Each one was a new installment of Room 404. The man was still there, interacting with the faces on the wall. And every time I watched, my reflection in the wall grew clearer, more lifelike. The final video came last night. It showed the man standing in the room, facing the camera, but this time, he wasn't alone. There was someone else in the room, sitting on the bed. It was me. I don't know what's going to happen next. The tapping is back, louder than ever, and the whispers have turned into screams. The walls around me feel alive, like they're closing in. I can see the faces pressing through the paint, their eyes watching, their mouths moving silently. If you ever come across a link to the watching wall, don't click it. No curiosity is worth what I've been through. Because once you see the wall sees you, and it never stops watching. I've always been the curious type. Not the kind of curiosity that gets you into harmless mischief, but the kind that leads you down paths you're better off avoiding. That's how I ended up on the dark web. That's how I found the Veil. It started with a late-night conversation in a chat room. I wasn't looking for anything specific, just killing time. Someone mentioned a site that supposedly showed lost footage. Videos that had been erased from the world but still lingered in this shadowy corner of the internet. They called it the Veil, where forgotten lives reside. The person who shared the link warned us not to go there. Once you watch, they said, it watches back. Of course, I thought it was just some edgy urban legend. But my curiosity was stronger than my caution. Accessing the Veil was easier than I expected. After setting up Tor and my VPN, I followed the link. The website's design was bare bones. Just a gray background with a search bar and a tagline. What the world erased, we preserved. Beneath the search bar was a random selection of video thumbnails, each with a title. They were vague, cryptic. The last broadcast, the basement, do not open. One thumbnail caught my eye. It was titled Through Her Eyes. The image was blurry, showing what looked like an empty street at night. I hesitated for a moment, but I clicked it. The video began with shaky handheld footage. It was nighttime, the camera panning across an abandoned neighborhood. The streetlights flickered, casting eerie shadows on the cracked pavement. The person filming didn't speak, but their breathing was loud and ragged, like they were running from something. The camera turned toward a house at the end of the street. It was old and decrepit, the windows boarded up, the paint peeling. A faint light flickered inside, visible through the gaps in the boards. The person holding the camera approached the house slowly, their footsteps crunching on broken glass. When they reached the door, they paused. For a moment, the screen was still. Then, the door creaked open on its own. Inside, the house was almost entirely dark, save for the flickering light coming from a room down the hallway. The camera moved toward the light, the breathing growing heavier. The room was empty, except for a single chair in the center. On the chair sat a broken doll, its face cracked, its glassy eyes staring straight ahead. The light came from an old television in the corner. Static filled the screen, but faint images flickered in the background. Faces, places, too quick to make out. The camera focused on the television. The static cleared for a moment, and a video played. It showed a girl, maybe 9 or 10 years old, sitting in a room identical to the one on the screen. She was staring at a television, just like the one in the room. Her expression was blank, her eyes unblinking. Then, slowly, she turned to face the camera. Her mouth moved, but no sound came out. Suddenly, the screen went black. The video ended, leaving only the reflection of my face on my laptop screen. I sat there, heart pounding, trying to make sense of what I'd just seen. I told myself it was just a creepy project, some elaborate ARG designed to scare people. But then my laptop screen flickered. A new video started playing, unprompted. It was the same house, the same hallway. But this time, the camera moved differently. The footsteps weren't cautious, they were deliberate. The camera turned sharply, focusing on the television. The static was gone, replaced by a live feed of me. I froze. On the screen, I could see myself sitting at my desk, staring at the laptop. The angle was impossible, like it was filmed from the ceiling. I looked up, half expecting to see a camera, but there was nothing there. The video zoomed in on my face, and then it cut to black. New text appeared on the screen. "You are through the veil now." I slammed the laptop shut, my hands shaking. I tried to convince myself it was just a clever trick, a hacker messing with me. But that night, I couldn't sleep. Every sound, Every shadow felt like something watching, waiting. The next morning, I found a new email in my inbox. The sender's address was a random string of numbers and letters. The subject line read, "Through her eyes." The body of the email contained only a link. Against my better judgment, I clicked it. The video was another live feed, but this time, it wasn't my room. It was an unfamiliar bedroom, dimly lit. The camera panned across the room, revealing a woman lying in bed, asleep. The camera moved closer, stopping just above her face. Her eyes snapped open, and she whispered, "Who's there?" The feed cut off, replaced by another line of text. "You should not have seen this." I shut off my laptop and disconnected it from the internet. But it didn't matter. The videos kept appearing. Sometimes they would play on their own, other times I'd find them on my phone, my tablet, even my smart TV. Each one was worse than the last. One video showed me walking through my apartment, filmed from behind. I had no memory of it happening. Another showed my reflection in a mirror, but instead of copying my movements, it stared back at me, unblinking. The final straw came when I received a video of myself sleeping. In the background, I could see a figure standing in the corner, watching. I've since moved to a new city, changed all my devices, and stopped using the internet entirely. But it hasn't helped. The veil isn't just a website, it's a doorway. And once you step through, it never lets you leave. If you ever find a link to the veil, don't click it. Don't let your curiosity trap you the way it trapped me. Because some things aren't meant to be seen. And once you see them, they see you too. I never should have clicked the link. I keep telling myself that, like it'll somehow change what happened. But it won't. It's been weeks, and no matter where I go, I can still feel its eyes on me. It all started late one night when I was aimlessly browsing through forums. I was too wired to sleep, but too tired to do anything productive. That's when I stumbled across a thread titled, "The Hidden Cinema." Most of the posts were jokes or rumors about strange videos people had found on the dark web. But one comment stood out. It simply read, "Don't look for the midnight matinee. Some shows aren't meant to be seen." That was all it took to spark my curiosity. I spent the next hour setting up Tor and a VPN. I wasn't new to the dark web, but I'd never gone looking for anything so specific. I searched for the midnight matinee, following vague instructions and cryptic hints buried in forum posts. Eventually, I found it. The website was unsettlingly minimal. Just a black background with a single line of text, "Choose your seat." Below, it was a drop-down menu with seat numbers ranging from 1 to 100. I chose 13, for no reason other than that it felt appropriately eerie. The screen flickered, and then a video player appeared. The title read, "Session 13, The Last Performance." The video began with an empty theater. The seats were old and worn, the kind you'd see in a forgotten cinema from decades ago. The screen at the front was blank, its surface cracked and stained. The camera moved slowly, as if someone was walking down the aisle. I could hear faint breathing, but no footsteps. As the camera panned across the rows of seats, I noticed something strange. The seats weren't empty. Shadows sat in them, faint outlines of people who weren't really there. Their heads were turned toward the screen, unmoving. The camera didn't linger on them. Instead, it focused on the stage. That's when the whispering started. It was soft at first, just a murmur in the background. But it grew louder, overlapping voices speaking in a language I didn't understand. The camera turned toward the screen, which was no longer blank. A video was playing, but it was hard to make out. The image was grainy, the colors washed out. It showed a house, dimly lit, with a single window glowing faintly in the darkness. The camera zoomed in on the window, and I felt my stomach drop. Inside, I could see a figure. It was blurry, but it looked like someone sitting at a desk, staring at a computer screen. As the camera got closer, I realized the figure was me. I slammed my laptop shut, my heart racing. It wasn't possible. It couldn't have been me. It was just some sick coincidence, some prank designed to mess with people like me. But I couldn't shake the feeling that it wasn't a coincidence at all. The next morning, I tried to convince myself it was just a dream. But when I opened my laptop, the video was still there. The player was frozen on the last frame, a close-up of my face staring back at me. My reflection in the screen looked wrong. It was subtle, but there was something off about my expression, like it wasn't really me. I deleted everything, the browser, the history, even the VPN, but it didn't matter. The next night, I received an email from an address I didn't recognize. The subject line read, "Showtime." The email contained a link. Against my better judgment, I clicked it. The page that opened was another video player, but this time, the title read, "Session 14. Your turn?" The video started in my bedroom. The camera was positioned in the corner, showing me sitting at my desk. I was on my laptop, typing away, completely unaware of the camera watching me. My blood turned to ice as I realized the timestamp on the video was from that very moment. I looked around the room, but there was no camera. The walls were bare, and the only light came from my laptop screen. But on the video, I could see something else. A shadow moved behind me, just out of focus. It got closer, its form becoming clearer. It was tall and thin, its limbs impossibly long. Its face was featureless, just a blank expanse of pale skin. In the video, I didn't notice it. I just kept typing, oblivious to the thing standing inches behind me. Then, slowly, it reached out. I shut the laptop and ran out of the room, my chest tight with fear. I didn't stop until I was outside, the cold night air stinging my skin. I stayed at a friend's house that night, but I couldn't sleep. Every time I closed my eyes, I saw that shadow, its hand reaching for me. The next day, I tried to explain what had happened, but my friend just looked at me like I was crazy. I couldn't blame them. It sounded crazy, but I knew it was real. I could feel it. A presence, always watching, always waiting. The emails didn't stop. Each one contained a new video. They showed me going about my day, eating breakfast, walking to class, even sleeping. And in every video, the shadow was there. Sometimes it was in the background, barely visible. Other times, it was closer, its blank face filling the frame. I've tried everything to make it stop. I've moved, changed my devices, even stopped using the internet altogether. But it doesn't matter. The Midnight Matinee isn't just a website. It's a trap, a doorway to something that shouldn't exist. Last night, I received a new email. There was no subject line, no message, just a video attachment. I haven't opened it yet, but I know what it will show. It will be me, sitting here, writing this story. And in the background, the shadow will be there, watching. If you ever come across a link to the Midnight Matinee, don't click it. Don't let your curiosity pull you in, because once the show starts, it never ends. They say curiosity killed the cat, but no one ever tells you what happens after. I found out the hard way. It started innocently enough, just another late night spent browsing strange forums, diving headfirst into the unknown corners of the internet. That's when I found the thread about the Red Window. The post was vague, just a short paragraph warning people to stay away. It read, "If you find the Red Window, don't look through it. Some things should never be seen." There was no link, no instructions on how to find it. Just a warning, surrounded by hundreds of comments speculating on what it could be. Most people called it a hoax, but a few claimed to have seen it. Their stories were eerily similar. Videos that felt too real, a lingering sense of being watched, and something else. Something they couldn't describe. I should have stopped there, but I didn't. I spent the next week scouring forums and chat rooms, piecing together fragments of information. Slowly, the pieces began to form a picture. The Red Window wasn't a typical dark website. It didn't have a URL you could share or search for. It was an experience, something you stumbled upon only when you weren't looking. But there were hints, clues buried in cryptic posts, whispers in forgotten corners of the web. One night, while following one of those trails, I found it. The page was unlike anything I'd seen before. A black screen with a single red rectangle in the center. No text, no buttons, no links. Just the window. I stared at it, my heart pounding. After a moment, the rectangle began to pulse, almost like it was alive. I didn't have to click anything. The site opened on its own. The screen went black for a few seconds, and then a video began to play. It was filmed in a dimly lit room, the camera shaky as it panned across a wall covered in old photographs. The photos were strange. Most of them were blurry, like they'd been taken in a rush. But a few were sharp, almost too sharp, showing faces that seemed to stare straight through the lens. As the camera moved, I noticed something odd. The photographs weren't just on the wall. They were part of it. The faces seemed to ripple slightly, like the surface of water disturbed by a breeze. Then the camera stopped, focusing on a single photograph. It was me. I froze, my breath catching in my throat. The photo wasn't of me now, but of me as a child, sitting on the front steps of the house I grew up in. I hadn't seen that photo in years. How could it be here? The camera lingered on the image, the sound of heavy breathing filling the room. Then, slowly, the photo began to change. The colors faded, the edges blurred, and the face, my face, started to melt, twisting into something unrecognizable. The video cut to black, and for a moment, I thought it was over. But then the screen flickered, and a new scene appeared. This time, the camera was in a different room. My room. I could see myself, sitting at my desk, staring at the screen. The angle was impossible, as if the camera was hovering just behind me. My reflection in the laptop screen stared back, but it didn't move the way I did. Instead, it smiled. I slammed the laptop shut and stumbled back, my chest tight with fear. I told myself it was a trick, some kind of elaborate prank. But deep down, I knew it wasn't. Something about the way the video felt. It wasn't like anything I'd ever experienced. It wasn't just a video. It was watching me. That night, I couldn't sleep. Every time I closed my eyes, I saw that red window, pulsing like a heartbeat. I tried to shake it off, to convince myself it was nothing. But the next morning, when I opened my laptop, the window was still there. I didn't click it. I didn't have to. The video started playing on its own. This time, the camera was outside, moving through a dark forest. The trees were tall and twisted, their branches reaching out like claws. The sound of footsteps echoed, but the camera never showed who was holding it. The breathing was louder now, heavier, as if whatever was filming was struggling to keep going. The camera stopped in front of a house. It was old and rotting, the windows shattered, the door hanging off its hinges. Slowly, the camera moved closer. As it reached the porch, the door creaked open, revealing nothing but darkness inside. The camera hesitated, then stepped inside. The footage was shaky, the lens struggling to adjust to the low light. The walls were covered in scratches, deep gouges that looked like they'd been made by something with claws. In the center of the room was a table, and on the table was a single photograph. The camera zoomed in on the photo, and my blood ran cold. It was another picture of me, but this one was recent. It showed me sitting at my desk, staring at the screen, but there was something wrong with my face. My eyes were too wide. My mouth twisted into a grin that didn't belong to me. Behind me, in the shadows, was a figure. Tall, thin, its face obscured. The screen went black, and a message appeared. The window is open. I didn't know what to do. I shut down my laptop, unplugged it, and shoved it in a drawer. But it didn't help. That night, I heard tapping on my bedroom window. It was faint at first, barely audible. But it grew louder, more insistent, until it sounded like someone was pounding on the glass. When I finally worked up the courage to look, there was nothing there. Just the darkness outside. But as I turned away, I saw it. Reflected in the glass was the red window, pulsing faintly, waiting. I haven't used my laptop since. I've tried to forget, to pretend it never happened. But the window doesn't need the internet to find me. Sometimes, when I close my eyes, I can still see it. And I know that one day, it won't just be a video. One day, it will be real. If you ever hear about the red window, don't look for it. Don't let your curiosity lead you to the same mistake I made. Because once you look through the window, something on the other side starts looking back. And it never stops. I never thought my curiosity would lead me to the dark web. But there I was, staring at the screen in my dimly lit room, unsure of what to do next. It all started one night, when I was hanging out with my friends after school. We were talking about random stuff, like what we'd do if we had unlimited money, or the weirdest thing we had ever seen on the internet. Then, one of my friends, Max, brought up the dark web. It sounded like something straight out of a horror movie. You know, Max said, his eyes wide, there are some crazy things on the dark web. like videos of people doing things you wouldn't believe. I didn't take him seriously at first. Max was always joking around, and I thought it was just one of his exaggerations. But then, he told us about a video he had heard of. It was supposedly called The Man Behind the Mask, and it was something so disturbing that it had been removed from every normal platform, but it could still be found on the dark web. My curiosity got the better of me. That night, when my parents were asleep and the house was quiet, I decided to check it out. I didn't expect to find anything, just a story to tell my friends the next day. But I had no idea what I was getting myself into. I searched online about how to access the dark web. It seemed simple enough. I downloaded the Tor browser and followed the steps to access websites with strange, unmarked links. There was a sense of excitement mixed with fear as I navigated through the strange world of the dark web. The websites I came across were nothing like anything I had seen before. There were strange forums with people talking in codes, and even stranger things like marketplaces selling, well, let's just say not legal stuff. But I didn't care about that. I was looking for the video. I wasn't sure if I'd find it, but the thrill of it was too much. I kept searching, and after what felt like hours, I finally found a link labeled The Man Behind the Mask. My heart raced. The page was blank except for a single video file with no description. I clicked it. The video started without warning. The screen was pitch black at first, and I could hear breathing. Slow and steady. It wasn't like the typical YouTube video where you could skip the intro. No, this one was different. My eyes strained to see anything in the dark. Then, suddenly, a figure appeared on screen. A man, dressed in a black hoodie, his face completely hidden under a mask. The kind of mask you might see in old horror films, white, cracked, and hollow-eyed. It was almost like he wasn't real. The man didn't move. He just stood there, breathing heavily. The silence was suffocating, and the longer I watched, the more uncomfortable I felt. I thought about turning it off, but I couldn't. I was stuck, like I had to see what happened next. The video continued, but something about it felt off. The atmosphere was suffocating, and then the man spoke. His voice was low and raspy, like someone who hadn't spoken in years. "You shouldn't be watching this," he said. I froze. His voice seemed to echo in my room, and I suddenly felt like I wasn't alone. The hairs on my arms stood up. My heart pounded, and I could feel my stomach drop. I wanted to turn it off, but my fingers wouldn't move. It was as if the screen had control over me now. Then, the man started to move. Slowly at first, like he was unsure of what to do next. It's crazy how things can change in a single night. How a simple decision can spiral into something you never could have imagined. That's what happened to me when I made the mistake of venturing into the dark web. I had heard stories about the dark web before. Everyone at school talked about it in hushed tones. Whispers about things they shouldn't have seen, things they shouldn't have done. It was like a forbidden world, a place you weren't supposed to go. But, like most things in life, curiosity got the best of me. One Friday night, my friends and I were playing video games when someone mentioned the dark web again. They'd seen something there, something strange. A video that was being passed around on these hidden forums. They said it was an auction unlike any you could imagine. A silent auction, my friend Jake called it. It's not like eBay or anything. It's dark, terrifying. It's a place where people bid on things. Lives. I didn't believe him. How could I? Who would do that? But Jake was insistent. He pulled out his phone, showing me some screenshots of a webpage. It was hard to make out what was going on in the images, but I could tell that they were screenshots of some sort of list. At the top of the page was a heading, Silent Auction, Items for Sale. Beneath that were several listings, though I couldn't make sense of them at first glance. I didn't ask for more details. I should have stopped there, but instead, my curiosity got the better of me. I decided I was going to check it out for myself. I didn't even know what I was looking for, but I had to know if it was real. I had to see it with my own eyes. I waited until my parents went to bed that night, and then, with a pounding heart, I fired up my computer. I searched for the Tor browser. I had heard it was the gateway to the dark web, and after some quick research, I figured out how to install it. The whole process made me feel like a criminal, and my palms were sweaty as I clicked through the steps, my thoughts racing. What was I about to do? Eventually, I was in. The dark web looked like something straight out of a movie. Dim, distorted websites with cryptic names and strange links. I had no idea what I was doing. I felt like I was wandering through a maze. Every click made my heart beat faster, but there was no going back now. I had come this far. I didn't find the silent auction right away, but after some searching, I finally stumbled upon a website that seemed to match the description. The page loaded slowly, with strange symbols and random words and languages I didn't understand. The auction items were listed in a simple, straight-to-the-point way, but when I looked closer, my stomach dropped. The descriptions weren't like anything I had seen before. The first listing said, Item number 1. Package A, bid starting, $50,000. There was no more description, no photo, no details, just the title and the price. I felt a sense of dread, but I kept scrolling. More items followed. Item number 2. Package B, bid starting, $200,000. And another. Item number 3. Package C, bid starting, $10,000. The descriptions were always the same, short and cryptic, but the prices were ridiculously high. Who would buy this stuff? Why was it so expensive? I had to know more. I clicked on one of the items. The screen flickered, and for a moment, I thought it was a mistake, that I had gone too far. But then it loaded, and my heart froze. It was a video. The title of the video said, Item number 1. Package A condition, new. I didn't know what that meant, but I clicked play. The video began, and it was dark, pitch black at first. The camera moved slowly, shakily, like it was handheld. The video was grainy, and the sound was muffled. I couldn't make out much, but as the camera zoomed in, I could see what looked like a person tied to a chair, their hands bound behind their back. It was a man. His eyes were wide open, staring straight at the camera. His body was shaking, and it was clear that he was terrified. I could see him trying to speak, but his mouth was taped shut. The camera zoomed in on his face, and then the lights flickered on. The scene that followed was something I will never forget. The man's face was pale, and his skin was covered in cuts and bruises. It looked like he had been through hell. Behind him, I could hear voices, low murmurs, as if a group of people was watching him. The camera shifted, and for a split second, I saw a face in the shadows. It was a man, wearing a black suit, but his face was obscured by shadows. Suddenly, the camera focused on a table beside the man. On the table were various items, tools I didn't recognize, but they didn't look friendly. The camera zoomed in on them, and the silence that followed made my stomach churn. I wanted to stop the video. My hands were shaking, but I couldn't. It was like something had a grip on me, pulling me deeper into this nightmare. The man in the chair began to struggle, his body convulsing as if he were trying to break free. But the ropes held him in place. And then, the worst part, the man in the suit stepped into the frame. His voice was calm, almost too calm, as he spoke to the man in the chair. "You know why you're here," he said. "You were sold to the highest bidder. You're just property now." I couldn't watch anymore. I slammed my hand on the keyboard, but nothing happened. The video wouldn't stop. It just kept playing, showing the horrifying scene unfold as I sat there, frozen, too scared to move. The man in the chair let out a muffled scream, but it was cut off suddenly, as if someone had hit the mute button. I could feel my heart racing in my chest. What had I just witnessed? Was this real? Was this actually happening somewhere in the world? I felt sick to my stomach. I wanted to turn off the screen, but I couldn't. I was trapped, like a spectator to something I couldn't unsee. Eventually, the screen faded to black, and a single line of text appeared. Item number 1. Package A, sold to the highest bidder. The page went blank. The video ended, and I was left staring at a loading screen, unable to comprehend what I had just seen. I didn't know what to do. I closed the browser, wiped the history, and told myself that I had to forget it. But deep down, I knew I could never forget what I had witnessed. The man's face, the look of terror in his eyes, it haunted me. The fact that people like him were being sold, treated like objects, made my blood run cold. I didn't tell anyone about what happened that night. Not even Jake. How could I? I didn't want to seem weak or scared, but I was. I still am. It's been weeks since I saw that video, and every time I close my eyes, I can still see the man's face. I can still hear the eerie silence of the auction, the muffled voice of the man in the suit. I know I'll never be able to erase that memory, and I've learned a lesson I'll never forget. Some things are better left untouched. Some doors are meant to stay closed. It all began as a simple dare. I had just turned 18, and to be honest, I felt invincible. Being an adult meant I could do whatever I wanted, whenever I wanted. So, when my best friend, Evan, challenged me to visit the dark web, I didn't think twice. It sounded thrilling, dangerous even, but that's what made it exciting. Evan and I had been close since elementary school. We grew up on a steady diet of horror movies and late-night stories about creepy, hidden corners of the internet. It was the kind of stuff that sparked our imaginations but never felt real. But when Evan told me about this secret room on the dark web, I was intrigued. He had heard it was a place where people posted bizarre and disturbing videos, things that didn't belong in the normal world. Most people can't find it. It's buried deep in the layers of the dark web, Evan explained one afternoon. But I know a guy who's seen it. It's called the Forgotten Room. I laughed it off at first. The name alone seemed like something out of a bad horror flick. But as the conversation went on, Evan told me that if I could get in, I'd see things no one else had ever seen. Videos that were too disturbing to be posted anywhere else. Stuff so creepy it would make my skin crawl. You have to see it for yourself, Evan insisted. It's worth it. Besides, you know how to get onto the dark web, right? I nodded. I had done my research and accessed the dark web before, though I had never gone too deep. My curiosity had always been more about the stories than actually finding something. But now, with Evan's words echoing in my mind, I felt a new sense of urgency. What could I lose? It was just a video, right? That night, after everyone had gone to sleep, I went into my room, closed the door, and fired up my computer. I opened the Tor browser, entered the strange, encrypted links, and began searching. The dark web was full of eerie sites. Some were marketplaces selling illegal items. Others were forums where people discussed things I couldn't even begin to understand. But then, I found it. The Forgotten Room was a simple website with no description, no fancy pictures, just a list of links. The only clue that I was in the right place was a single line of text in the middle of the page. Enter at your own risk. I clicked on the link, my heart pounding in my chest. The page that loaded was dark, almost too dark to read. There was a strange symbol at the top of the screen, a spiral that seemed to move if I stared at it long enough. Below the symbol was a single button, Enter Room. With a deep breath, I clicked the button. The screen flickered for a second, and then the video appeared. It was a live stream. The camera was shaky, as though it was being held by someone in a hurry. At first, I couldn't make sense of what I was looking at. The room was dim, almost completely dark except for a small flickering light that illuminated one corner. There was an old wooden chair in the center of the room, and a person was sitting in it. The figure's face was hidden in the shadows, but I could tell they were bound, their hands tied tightly behind the chair. I was about to click away, but then the person in the chair moved slightly, making a small noise. That's when I heard the voices. They were soft at first, whispering in the background. I couldn't make out the words, but the tone was unsettling, as if the voices were speaking in a language they didn't want anyone to understand. I leaned closer to the screen, unable to tear my eyes away. Suddenly, the camera shifted, and a man stepped into the frame. He was tall, with a plain black hoodie that covered most of his face. The only thing visible was his mouth, which was stretched into a thin, cruel smile. The person in the chair tried to move again, but the ropes were too tight. "Why are you here?" the man asked, his voice cold and unfeeling. It sent a chill down my spine. The person in the chair struggled to speak, but they were gagged. All I could hear were muffled sounds. The man in the hoodie reached into his pocket and pulled out something that made my stomach drop. It was a small knife, its blade gleaming in the dim light. He held it up, inspecting it for a moment before turning back to the bound figure in the chair. I felt my pulse quicken. I knew I should leave. I should turn off the screen and forget this entire thing ever happened. But for some reason, I didn't. I stayed there, watching, my eyes glued to the screen. The man approached the person in the chair and ran the blade along their arm, not cutting deeply, but just enough to make a small wound. The person flinched, trying to pull away, but the ropes held them firmly in place. The man laughed softly, almost as if he were enjoying the suffering. "This is what happens when you're in the wrong place at the wrong time," he said. His voice sounded like it belonged to someone who had done this before. I felt sick to my stomach. The room felt like it was closing in on me. I thought about closing the window, about getting up and walking away, but I couldn't move. It was like the screen was hypnotizing me, pulling me deeper into this nightmare. Then, something changed. The man with the knife turned to the camera, his eyes now visible under the hood. He stared directly at the lens, and for a brief moment, I felt like he was looking right at me. His expression shifted, and a smile spread across his face. "You shouldn't have come here," he said, his voice a whisper now. "You've seen too much." I froze, my breath caught in my throat. I knew something was wrong. I knew that this wasn't just a random video. This was something real, and it was a warning. The video cut to black, and for a second, I thought it was over. I breathed a sigh of relief, thinking I had escaped. But then, the page reloaded, and a new video popped up. I clicked away immediately, but the screen wouldn't go back. The page had frozen, and nothing I did could make it disappear. It was like the website had trapped me there. Panic surged through me as I realized I couldn't get out. The next moment, my phone buzzed. I looked at the message from Evan. "Are you watching it? You can't stop now, can you?" My heart raced. How did he know? How did he know exactly what I was seeing? I typed a quick reply. "How did you know I was watching?" The reply came almost immediately, "Because I've been watching too. And I don't think either of us can get out now." I stared at the message, horror creeping into my mind. I tried to shut everything down, to turn off my computer and my phone, but they wouldn't respond. It was as if someone was controlling them remotely. And then the worst part, just as I thought it couldn't get worse, my door creaked open behind me. I turned quickly, my blood running cold. No one was there. But as I turned back to the screen, I saw the message from Evan again. "It's too late. They know you're here." The forgotten room had just begun. The next morning, everything was normal. The sun was up, and my computer was working fine again. But I couldn't shake the feeling that something had changed. I tried to reach out to Evan, but he never answered. As the days passed, I began to see things in the corner of my eye. Shadows moving, whispers that seemed to come from nowhere. I started to feel like I was being watched, like someone, or something, was waiting for me to slip up. The forgotten room wasn't just a video anymore. It was part of my life, and I couldn't escape it. I was never one to believe in ghost stories or paranormal phenomena. I always chalked it up to people's overactive imaginations or simple coincidences. But after what happened to me, I don't know what to believe anymore. It started as a normal Friday night, like any other. I had just finished a huge final project for school and decided to reward myself with a relaxing evening. My friends were all hanging out in the group chat, talking about their weekend plans, when I received a message from an old acquaintance named Leo. We hadn't spoken in months, but his message was short. "Check out the video on the deep web. You won't regret it." At first, I almost ignored it. I didn't want to get involved in anything that seemed shady, but there was something in the way he phrased it that caught my attention. The fact that Leo, of all people, would send me something like that made me curious. Leo had always been a bit of an internet explorer, constantly diving into the deepest, darkest parts of the internet. I never joined him, but I had heard stories. Stories about things people found in those hidden corners of the web, things better left unseen. So, against my better judgment, I responded, "What is it?" He replied almost immediately, "Just trust me. You won't be able to look away once you start. It's a hidden video. It's different." I hesitated, but curiosity got the best of me, as it often does. I had to see for myself. I wasn't going to be the only one who hadn't seen the thing everyone was talking about. I could feel my heart race as I typed, "Okay, send it." Leo quickly sent me a link. It was a Tor link, nothing unusual for the dark web. I'd accessed the dark web before, but I had never ventured too deep. It was mostly filled with strange forums, obscure online marketplaces, and unmoderated content. But Leo was always one to find things that others couldn't. I clicked the link, my hand shaking slightly. The screen on my computer flickered for a moment before a dark, empty page loaded. There was nothing on it, just a black background and a single video player in the center. The video title read, "The Silent Caller." No description, no details. I clicked play. At first, the screen was black. I could hear the faintest sounds, almost like static, coming from my speakers. Then, a dim light flickered, revealing the outline of a person sitting in a chair. The camera was shaky, as if it was handheld, and the figure was barely visible. They were hunched over, their back to the camera, and their hands were bound to the chair with thick ropes. The figure didn't move at first. They were completely still, as if frozen in place. Then, after a long moment of silence, a voice crackled through the static. It was a low, guttural whisper. "Help me." I froze. The voice sounded so real, so desperate. I thought about clicking away, but I couldn't. Something about it had a grip on me. The whispers continued, getting louder and more frantic. I leaned closer to the screen, my heart racing. The figure in the chair slowly turned around. Their face was obscured by shadows, but their eyes, those eyes, I could see them clearly, wide open, filled with fear, and staring directly into the camera. A chill ran down my spine. Suddenly, the lights in the room flickered off, leaving me in complete darkness. The only light came from the computer screen. I instinctively reached to turn on the lamp next to my desk, but before I could, the video changed. The figure was now standing, facing away from the camera, their head hanging low. The ropes had disappeared, and they were free. I didn't know how that was possible. It felt wrong. The figure began to shuffle slowly toward the camera, their feet dragging along the floor. The camera zoomed in, and I could see their face clearly now. It was pale, ghostly, and covered in dark veins, like something out of a nightmare. Their eyes, though, were the most unsettling thing. The pupils were dilated, black as coal, and they seemed to move independently, almost like they weren't even connected to the figure's body. The figure raised its head, and I saw that it wasn't just staring at the camera, it was staring at me. I blinked, and for a moment, I thought I saw something else in the background of the video. It was a shadow, moving quickly, just behind the figure. But as soon as I focused on it, the video cut to black. My screen froze for a moment, and then the video began to rewind. It was almost like the video was being played in reverse, the images flickering and distorting. The figure moved backward, slowly returning to the chair, where they were once again bound. Their face turned toward the camera one last time, and then the voice returned. "You're next." The video cut off. I sat there in complete silence, staring at the black screen. My breath was shallow, and I could feel my heart pounding in my chest. What had I just watched? Was it real? Was it staged? I had no idea, but I felt sick, like I had just watched something I wasn't meant to see. Something dangerous. I quickly closed the browser and tried to forget about it. I turned off my computer and went to bed, but no matter how hard I tried, I couldn't shake the feeling that something was wrong. I couldn't stop thinking about the face in the video, those eyes. As the night dragged on, I heard a sound. It was faint, like someone whispering my name. It was so quiet at first that I thought I had imagined it. But then, I heard it again. My heart skipped a beat. I grabbed my phone and checked the time. 3:12 a.m. I was alone in my room. There was no one else here. But the whispering continued. It wasn't loud enough to be a full voice, but it was unmistakable. A soft, chilling whisper calling my name from somewhere outside my door. I stood up, my body frozen with fear. The sound was coming from the hallway. I took a step forward, my mind racing, trying to convince myself it was just my imagination. Maybe it was the wind. Maybe it was the house settling. But then, I heard it again, closer this time. "Help me." I couldn't move. My feet felt like they were glued to the floor. I wanted to scream, but no sound came out. My hands were shaking as I reached for my phone again, desperately trying to call someone, anyone. But when I looked at the screen, I noticed something chilling. I had a new notification. It was from Leo. The message simply said, "I told you wouldn't be able to stop watching. Now they're coming for you." The blood drained from my face. I rushed to lock the door, but as I turned around, I saw something in the reflection of my bedroom window. It was just a shadow at first, but as I focused, I could make out the figure, tall, hunched, with glowing eyes. It was standing just outside my window, staring at me. I couldn't breathe. I was paralyzed with fear. The figure didn't move. It just stood there, its eyes locked onto mine. And then, as if it had been waiting for this moment, it raised one hand, pressing it against the glass. The window began to crack. I stumbled back, my mind spinning. I had to get out of there. I couldn't stay. But as I turned to the door, I heard the whisper again. This time, it was right behind me, cold and insistent. "Help me." I ran out of my room, my heart racing. But as I reached the hallway, I saw it. The figure from the video. It was standing in the middle of the hallway, blocking my way. Its head tilted at an unnatural angle, and its eyes, those eyes, were staring right at me. That's when I realized the truth. The silent caller wasn't just a video. It was something that followed you, something that found you, no matter where you went. I tried to scream, but no sound came out. The next morning, I woke up on the floor of my room, drenched in sweat. There was no figure in the hallway, no shadow by the window. Everything was as it should be. But I knew the truth now. The silent caller wasn't done with me. It was just waiting. And every time I close my eyes, I can feel its gaze. Those black, soulless eyes, waiting for me to make a mistake, waiting for me to slip up, so it can come for me again. I don't know how long I can keep running. I had always been drawn to the unknown, to things that seemed forbidden. Growing up, I would often stay up late, scouring the internet for creepy stories, conspiracy theories, and mysterious happenings. I never thought much of it. It was just harmless curiosity. But one night, everything changed. It all started with a conversation in a private chat room. It was a random night, nothing out of the ordinary. I was bored, scrolling through social media and chatting with friends, when a message popped up from someone I didn't recognize. The user's name was simply X. I thought it was a bot at first, but the message was personalized. It read, "I know you've been searching. You're looking for something darker, aren't you?" My heart skipped a beat. I hadn't mentioned anything about my interest to anyone recently, especially not online. But here this person was, knowing exactly what I had been looking for. I hesitated for a moment before replying. "Who is this?" A few moments passed before they responded. "Let's just say I know where to find things that others can't. Things that will make your skin crawl." I was intrigued. I didn't want to seem too eager, but I couldn't help myself. I had to know more. "What do you mean? What kind of things?" They responded quickly. "The kind of things that aren't meant to be found. The kind of things that only the dark web can provide." I wasn't an expert in the dark web, but I had read enough to know that it was home to all kinds of disturbing content, illegal marketplaces, encrypted forums, and videos that no one should ever see. But there was something about X's message that piqued my curiosity. I had always wanted to explore deeper corners of the internet, but I had never taken the plunge. Now, I was being offered a glimpse into the abyss. I couldn't resist. "Show me," I typed, not sure what I was getting myself into. Almost immediately, a link appeared in my chat. It was long, full of random letters and numbers, clearly masking its true destination. There was no description, no explanation, just the link. I stared at the screen for a moment, my heart racing. I knew I should probably back out. This was dangerous. But a strange compulsion took over me, and I clicked the link. The page that loaded was almost entirely black. The only thing visible was a small video player in the center of the screen. It didn't have a title, no description, nothing except for the video. I clicked play. The video started with a grainy, distorted image. At first, all I could see was darkness, and then slowly, a dim light flickered into view. The scene was a room, a small, windowless room. The camera was positioned in the corner, almost as if it was hidden, spying on whoever was inside. A figure sat in the center of the room, facing the camera. They were wearing a mask, a blank, featureless white mask, with black holes for eyes and no mouth. The figure was perfectly still, as if they were waiting for something. Waiting for me. I couldn't take my eyes off the screen. even though I could feel a growing sense of unease deep in my stomach. The silence stretched on for several long seconds. I thought about pausing the video, but something kept me glued to the screen. Suddenly, the figure shifted slightly in their seat, and a voice crackled through the speakers. "Do you want to play a game?" I froze. The voice was distorted, robotic. It didn't sound like a person at all. It sounded like something far more sinister. I couldn't bring myself to reply, but the figure continued. "You have no choice. You're already here." The figure stood up, and the camera zoomed in on their face. Even though the mask was featureless, I could sense something in their eyes, something cold and calculating. I could feel it, even through the screen. "I will ask you 3 questions," the voice continued. "Answer them correctly, and you can leave. But if you fail," the figure let out a soft laugh. "Well, let's just say you won't like the consequences." I sat there, my fingers trembling over the keyboard. I wanted to stop the video, but I couldn't. The screen had a strange hold on me, pulling me in deeper. The first question appeared on the screen in bold, red letters. "What is the one thing you can never undo?" I stared at it for a long time. It was a simple question, but there was something unsettling about it. It felt like a trap. I knew this was part of the game, but I wasn't sure what the right answer was. I glanced around the room, trying to shake off the feeling of dread creeping up my spine. I typed my answer. "A lie?" The figure in the video didn't react immediately. The room was silent for several seconds, and then the voice spoke again. "Incorrect." The screen flickered, and the figure stepped toward the camera. The darkness seemed to close in around them, and I felt an overwhelming sense of fear. "You'll pay the price for that," the voice said. "The game has only just begun." I felt a jolt of panic surge through me. I wanted to close the video, turn it off, delete everything, but I couldn't. I had to know what would happen next. The second question appeared on the screen. "What is the one thing you can never escape?" I hesitated. The question seemed even more cryptic than the last. I had no idea what the right answer was. Was it fate? Death? The past? I couldn't decide. My mind raced, and in a moment of desperation, I typed an answer. "Fear." The figure tilted its head as if considering my answer. Then, slowly, it shook its head. "Wrong again." I could feel my palms sweating. The atmosphere in the video was growing darker, heavier. My pulse quickened, and I could hear my own heartbeat thudding in my ears. "This is your final question," the voice said, almost too calmly. "Get it wrong, and there will be no turning back." I could feel a deep sense of dread settle in my stomach. There was no way out now. I had to finish this. The final question appeared. "What is the one thing you can never hide?" I thought long and hard, but I was too scared to think clearly. I knew this was part of some twisted game, but my mind was racing. I typed the first thing that came to mind. The truth. The figure in the video didn't respond immediately. For a moment, everything was still, and I almost thought the video had ended. But then the camera zoomed in, and the figure's head tilted further to the side. "Correct," the voice said, the tone almost approving. "But it's too late for you now." The screen flickered, and suddenly, I was no longer watching a video. The room had gone completely dark, and there was a new sound. Something moving in the background. It was faint at first, like footsteps on the floor. But the sound grew louder, closer. I could feel my heart racing as I looked around my room. The air felt heavier, colder. It was like the darkness had followed me from the video and was now pressing in on me from all sides. And then, the phone rang. I picked it up, my hands shaking. It was an unknown number. I almost didn't answer, but something made me press the button. A voice, the same distorted voice from the video, whispered through the receiver. "You played the game, and now you belong to me." My blood ran cold as I dropped the phone. The room went silent again, but I couldn't shake the feeling that I was being watched. Every corner of my room felt like it was closing in on me. The screen on my computer went black. That was the last time I ever saw the video. I don't know how it happened, but from that night on, I couldn't escape the feeling that I was being followed. That voice, that figure, it stayed with me. Every time I closed my eyes, I could feel those eyes staring back at me. I had no idea how the person behind it knew so much about me, but I couldn't shake the feeling that I had made a terrible mistake. And now, Every time my phone rings, my heart stops, because I know it's never just a call anymore. It's them, and I can never hide from the masked room. It started on a regular Tuesday afternoon when I was scrolling through Reddit, trying to kill time between classes. I had been hearing rumors about the dark web for years, mostly from people who seemed like they were just making stuff up. But one comment caught my attention. The video titled "The Last Upload is the scariest thing you'll ever see. But be careful. Some people who watch it, they don't come back." At first, I thought it was just another creepypasta story. People on the internet love to hype up these kinds of things, and I'd seen my fair share of over-exaggerated tales. But something about the comment intrigued me. I clicked on the link, and sure enough, it was a Tor address, a deep, dark corner of the internet that most people never dare to explore. I'd heard of Tor before. It's a network where people can remain anonymous, and it's where a lot of disturbing and illegal content is hidden. I wasn't about to go deep into it, but curiosity gnawed at me. I didn't think I would actually go through with it, but I couldn't stop thinking about the video. I found myself downloading Tor, nervously setting up the browser, and wondering if I was about to do something I would regret. The internet felt like a different place on Tor. It was slower, more encrypted, as if everything had a hidden layer. I felt a strange tension building in the pit of my stomach as I typed the link into the Tor browser. It wasn't a flashy website with colorful banners. The page was dark, filled with cryptic text, images, and links to things I couldn't begin to understand. After what felt like an eternity, I clicked on a link titled "The Last Upload." The page opened, but all I saw was a single video player on a black screen. No title, no description, nothing. The video player had a play button, just like any other video, but I noticed something unsettling. The cursor hovered over the player, but it didn't move, as if the video was waiting for me to make the first move. I felt my palms sweat. My heart raced. I had heard the rumors, but I didn't expect it to feel this wrong. Despite everything in my gut telling me to leave, I clicked play. The video began with a low hum, almost like the sound of a broken machine. It wasn't a smooth start. The image on the screen was blurry, pixelated, but as the camera focused, I saw a figure standing in a dimly lit room. The figure was dressed in all black, their face obscured by a hood and a mask. They were holding something in their hand, but it was hard to tell what it was. The figure didn't move, not for a long time. The silence was deafening. My fingers hovered over the mouse, ready to click away at any moment. But I couldn't look away. There was something deeply unsettling about the stillness of the figure, something that felt wrong in a way I couldn't describe. Then, without warning, the figure started to speak. The voice was distorted, as if it was coming through a broken speaker. "Do you know what you're about to see?" The voice rasped. I felt a chill run through me. The words felt like a warning, but there was something else there, a sense of inevitability, like whatever was about to happen. I couldn't escape it. I swallowed hard and typed, "What is this? Who are you?" The figure didn't respond. Instead, they raised their hand, and the camera zoomed in on what they were holding. It was a small, faded envelope, old and yellowed with age. The figure carefully opened it, pulling out a single sheet of paper. As they unfolded it, the camera focused on the writing on the page. I couldn't make out the words at first. They were blurry, faint. But then, as the camera adjusted, the text became clear. It was a message, written in jagged, uneven handwriting. It read, "The last upload. Once you've seen this, there's no going back. You'll know the truth. And the truth is not what you expect." The figure placed the paper down and turned their head, as if looking directly at me through the screen. "You're here now," the distorted voice said. "There's no turning back." My heart pounded in my chest. The screen flickered, and the figure began to move toward the camera. I could see the detail in their face now. The mask wasn't just a mask. It was a featureless, blank face, almost like it had been carved from stone. The figure didn't speak anymore. They simply stared at the camera. Then, without warning, the camera cut to a different scene. It was a dark, empty hallway. The walls were bare, and the floor was covered in dust. The camera slowly moved down the corridor, and at the end, there was a door. The door creaked open, and the camera zoomed in, showing an old wooden table with a single object on it. It was a black and white photograph, framed and yellowed with age. The camera focused on the photo. It was a picture of a man, smiling, but something about the smile was off. It was too wide, too forced. The eyes seemed empty, vacant. And in the background of the photo, barely visible, was another figure. This one was blurred, but I could make out the shape, a shadowy, indistinct form. Suddenly, the camera jerked back, and the image flickered. The screen went black for a moment, and then it returned to the figure. This time, they were closer to the camera, standing right in front of it, their face inches away from the lens. The mask was now cracked. I could see small fractures running through it, like it had been damaged over time. The figure's eyes, those hollow, empty eyes, seemed to be staring directly into mine. And then, the figure reached up and slowly removed the mask. I couldn't believe what I saw. Underneath the mask was not a person's face, but a grotesque, featureless skull. Its flesh completely hollow, like the skin had been peeled away. The skull was barely recognizable, with jagged, sharp edges around the eyes and mouth. The figure reached inside the skull, pulling out something small and shiny. It was a video camera. "Everything is recorded," the voice said, almost as if mocking me. "The last upload is the only truth that matters." The screen flickered again, and this time, I heard a soft clicking sound. The figure's hands started to shake, as if they were malfunctioning, and the camera zoomed in on their hands as they clutched the small video camera. The video camera turned on, and for the first time, I could see what it was recording. It wasn't the figure in front of the camera. It was me. The camera zoomed in on my face, clearly reflecting the shock and terror I felt. I reached for the mouse to close the video, but the screen wouldn't respond. It was frozen. The figure's distorted voice came through again. "You've been watched. You've always been watched." The camera zoomed in on me even closer, showing every small detail of my face. I could see the sweat dripping down my forehead, my wide, fearful eyes. And then, as the camera focused on my eyes, the figure spoke one last time. "The truth is simple. There is no escape." The screen went black. I sat there, my breath shallow, my entire body trembling. I couldn't move. My mind raced, trying to make sense of what had just happened. I should have turned it off earlier. I should have never clicked the link. But there was something worse waiting for me. I looked down at my phone, which had been silent the whole time, but now it was buzzing. One new notification. It was a message from an unknown number. I opened it, my hands trembling. The message was simple. "You've seen it. Now you're part of it." The hairs on the back of my neck stood up as I read those words. My phone buzzed again, and I opened the next message. It was a picture, my own face, taken from the video, and in the background, there was something else. A figure standing in the shadows, watching me. I turned around quickly, but there was no one there. I didn't sleep that night. I couldn't. The video, the figure, those hollow eyes, it all kept replaying in my mind. And the worst part? I knew I hadn't just watched a video. I had become part of it. I don't know how much longer I have, but I know one thing. There's no way out now. Not for me. Not for anyone. And whoever is watching me, whoever is behind the last upload, they're always watching, waiting for me to make the wrong move. But I won't make it out. No one ever does. I didn't mean to get involved with the dark web. I really didn't. I was just a regular 18-year-old, trying to survive high school and navigate the confusing world of adulthood. But one evening, after a few too many sleepless nights scrolling through Reddit and social media, I ended up down a rabbit hole that I would never be able to escape. It all started with a strange email. I was just finishing up a report for school when I checked my inbox and saw an unfamiliar subject line. "Something you might be interested in." At first, I thought it was spam or some sort of marketing attempt, but something about it stood out. I clicked on it. The email was short. It read, "I know you've been searching for something real. You won't believe what I have to show you. But be warned, once you see it, there's no turning back." It was signed by an anonymous sender, someone with a string of random letters for a name. My curiosity got the best of me. I clicked on the link in the email, and it led me to a hidden website. I knew it was shady, but I didn't care. I had been bored for days, and the promise of something real sounded intriguing. The page was nothing like any normal website. The background was a deep shade of black, and the only visible content was a single video player in the center of the screen. It didn't have any title, description, or hint as to what it contained. Just the video. It seemed so simple, almost too simple. I don't know what I was expecting, but as soon as I saw that player, I felt an unsettling chill run down my spine. But, as stupid as it sounds, I clicked play. The video began with static. For a moment, it was just a blur of gray and black, like something was glitching. I thought the video was broken, but as the static cleared, I realized the image was an old-fashioned living room. The furniture was worn, the walls painted in shades of peeling yellow. A low hum filled the background, and the camera slowly zoomed in on a figure sitting in a chair. It was a man, probably in his late 40s or early 50s, dressed in an old suit that didn't fit him properly. His eyes were wide, staring directly at the camera, but there was something off about his face. It was like he was smiling, but the smile didn't reach his eyes. The emptiness in his gaze made my heart race. I tried to stop the video, but the player wouldn't respond. My fingers shook as I tried to click away, but it was like the video had taken control of my computer. I couldn't escape it. I couldn't even pause it. The man on the screen shifted slightly in his seat and began speaking in a low, cracked voice. "You want to see something real?" he said. His voice sent a shiver down my spine. Something that you can't unsee? I could barely breathe. My mind screamed at me to turn it off, but my body was frozen. There was something hypnotic about the way he spoke, his words like a chant, pulling me deeper into the video. He continued, "You're one of many, you know. They all come looking. They all want to see the truth. But they're not prepared for what they'll find." I felt my pulse quicken. Who was this person? What was he talking about? The camera slowly panned to the side of the room, and I saw something that made my stomach lurch. On the floor was a small, crumpled figure, a person. The figure was twitching, convulsing, as if they were trying to move but couldn't. The man in the chair didn't even acknowledge the figure on the floor. He just kept staring at the camera, his smile widening slightly. "You're not ready for this," he muttered, almost as if to himself. I wanted to scream, to shut the video off, but I couldn't move. I was completely paralyzed, trapped in the screen. Then, without warning, the camera shifted again. This time, it zoomed in on the man's face. The smile was wider now, too wide, stretching unnaturally across his face. His teeth were jagged, yellow, almost like they didn't belong to a human. "You'll see what happens when you watch," the man whispered, his voice crackling as if it was coming from a broken speaker. At that moment, the video flickered and went black. For a brief second, I thought it was over, but then, a chilling message appeared on the screen in bold red letters. "You've been marked. Your time has begun." My heart dropped. I couldn't believe what I was reading. What did that mean? Had I just made some kind of irreversible mistake? What had I just witnessed? Before I could process what had happened, the video cut back to the same living room, but it was different this time. The man in the suit was gone, replaced by someone else. A woman, her face obscured by shadows. Her eyes glowed an eerie, unnatural yellow, and her mouth was moving, though I couldn't hear anything. She was mouthing words, but the sound was distorted, too faint to make out. Suddenly, the camera jerked. I heard muffled screams, and the screen cut to black again. Then, a single image appeared. It was a phone number. The number was strange, almost like a code, and there was something haunting about it. I felt a strong compulsion to write it down, as if I didn't, something would happen. Before I could act on it, the screen went black. The video was over. For a long time, I just sat there, staring at the screen, unable to move. My mind was racing. What had I just watched? Who was that man? Who was the woman? And what was the phone number about? I didn't want to admit it, but deep down, I knew that whatever I had seen on that video wasn't just a prank. It was real, and somehow, I had become part of it. The next few days were a blur. I couldn't stop thinking about the video. It haunted my every waking moment. I couldn't get the man's smile out of my head, nor the woman's glowing eyes. I tried to shake it off, to convince myself that it was just a twisted, fake video, but the feeling wouldn't go away. That's when the phone rang. It was late at night, and I was lying in bed, trying to fall asleep. The ringing cut through the silence, sending a jolt of panic through me. I hesitated for a moment before picking up the phone. "Hello?" I said, my voice shaky. There was a long pause on the other end, and then a voice, crackling, distorted, but unmistakable, spoke. "You've seen it, haven't you?" the voice rasped. I froze, my blood running cold. "Who is this?" "It's only the beginning," the voice said. "You've been marked. You won't escape." The line went dead. I dropped the phone, my hands shaking uncontrollably. I felt like I was suffocating. This was too much. What had I gotten myself into? How could this person know about the video? How could they know that I had watched it? I tried to convince myself that it was a prank, a cruel joke. But as the days went on, strange things started to happen. I'd hear faint whispers at night, things moving in my room when I knew I was alone. My phone would ring, but no one would be on the other end. Every time I looked at the screen, I'd see the same number, the one from the video, waiting for me. And then the dreams began. In the dreams, I was back in that room. The same room from the video. The man in the suit was there, sitting in the chair, staring at me. His eyes were wide. His smile stretched impossibly far across his face. He never spoke, but I could hear his voice in my head, whispering the same words over and over again. "You've been marked. Your time has begun." I woke up in a cold sweat every time. I tried to tell myself that it was just a nightmare, that I could brush it off. But deep down, I knew something had changed. The feeling of being watched, of being hunted, never left me. It was always there, lurking just beyond the edges of my mind. One night, I decided I couldn't take it anymore. I had to get rid of whatever was haunting me. I remembered the number from the video, the one that had appeared after the woman's face had vanished. I had been avoiding it, terrified of what would happen if I called it. But I knew I had no choice. I dialed the number. The phone rang several times before someone picked up. I didn't say anything at first, just listening to the heavy breathing on the other end. Then, a voice, distorted but familiar, whispered, "You called. You shouldn't have." And just like that, everything went black. The phone went silent. The room went dark. The air was thick with something I couldn't name. I never saw the light again. I never saw anything again. And no one heard from me after that. But if you ever stumble across that video, the silent call, and if you feel the chill run down your spine, just know you've been warned. Once you watch, there's no going back. I used to think the dark web was just a myth. At least, that's what I told myself every time I heard someone talk about it. You know the stories, the ones that say if you search long enough, you can find anything, anything at all. Illegal stuff, disturbing videos, and people who are just strange. I never thought it would happen to me, but I was wrong. It all started one evening when I was with my friend Max. We were sitting in my bedroom, scrolling through social media and chatting about random stuff. Max had always been the curious one, always looking for something new and exciting. That day, he had a strange glint in his eye. "Hey, have you ever been on the dark web?" Max asked out of nowhere. I laughed, brushing it off. "What, like those deep web videos people talk about?" "I've heard of it, but I'm not dumb enough to go looking for trouble." Max grinned. "Well, I've been reading about it lately. Some of the stuff on there, it's insane. People say if you dig deep enough, you can find some seriously messed up stuff. Some stuff that's real." I stared at him, unsure whether to take him seriously or not. Max was the type of guy who liked to mess with people, so I figured this was just another one of his pranks. But his face had a seriousness about it that I hadn't seen before. It was like he had already seen something that made him question everything. I should have stopped him right then. I should have told him to forget about it. But instead, curiosity took hold of me. I didn't want to look like the scared one, so I said, "All right, show me what you're talking about. But only if we can bail if it gets too weird." Max nodded, already typing away on his phone. "I'll show you one video. That's it. No going down some rabbit hole." We had no idea what we were about to stumble into. Max pulled up a website I couldn't even remember the name of. It looked like any other sketchy website, but there was an eerie, unsettling aura about it. The interface was dark, the text barely legible, and the links scattered across the screen looked like they could lead anywhere. Max clicked on one that said live footage, and we both leaned in closer, not knowing exactly what we were about to see. The video player loaded slowly. When it finally appeared, the screen was static for a few seconds before it cleared, revealing a grainy live stream of what looked like a dark alley. The camera was shaky, and we couldn't see much except the dim light from a street lamp at the far end of the alley. We both squinted at the screen, trying to make out the details. "Is this it?" I whispered, already regretting clicking the link. Max didn't say anything. His eyes were glued to the screen. The camera focused on a figure standing in the alley, a man wearing a hood. He was just standing there, motionless, staring down at the ground. Then, after a few seconds, he slowly raised his head, and I saw his eyes, pale, empty, and almost lifeless. It was like he wasn't even looking at the camera but through it, staring into nothingness. "That's creepy as hell," I muttered, trying to laugh it off. Max didn't respond. He just stared at the screen, his face going pale. Then, the man spoke. His voice was low and distorted, like it was coming from a broken speaker. "I can hear you," he said. I froze. I thought it was some kind of prank or a weird audio glitch, but Max's expression told me he didn't think that was the case. The voice continued. "I know you're watching," the man said, his words more chilling than anything I had ever heard. I tried to laugh, but it didn't feel right. Something was wrong with this video. I could feel it. The screen flickered, and the camera panned to the side, revealing something that made my stomach drop. There, lying in the corner of the alley, was a small wooden box. The man walked over to it, his movements slow and deliberate. He knelt down, opened the box, and pulled out a piece of paper. It looked old, the edges frayed, and it was covered in what looked like blood. The camera zoomed in on the paper, and my blood ran cold. It was a message. The message read, "This video is only the beginning. You will find me again." I felt a shiver run down my spine. I looked at Max, and his face was drained of color. The man in the alley, whoever he was, had just made it clear that this wasn't some random video. It was personal. I reached for my phone, trying to exit the website, but it wouldn't load. I couldn't click anything. The video wouldn't stop. It was like the page had locked us in. The man stood up slowly, holding the bloodied paper. "The message has been delivered," he said, his voice still eerie and mechanical. "Now, your turn to answer." I started to panic. I could feel the hairs on the back of my neck standing up. I didn't know how, but something told me that this wasn't a joke anymore. This wasn't just a weird video. Something real was happening. Suddenly, the video cut to black. For a moment, I thought it was over. But then, a new image appeared on the screen. It was a simple message, just like the one in the alley, but this time, it was directed at us. "I know where you are." I swallowed hard. My heart raced as I looked around the room. The walls felt closer, the air heavier. Max and I didn't speak. We just stared at the screen, unsure what to do. The feeling of being watched, of being trapped, settled in deep within me. The screen flickered again, and we saw a new image. It was a live camera feed of my room. My heart skipped a beat. How was that possible? The camera angle was from the corner of the room, just out of sight, but it was unmistakably my bedroom. Max and I were frozen in place, staring at the screen, realizing that something, was in control of our devices. I felt like I couldn't breathe. The voice returned. "You're not alone," it whispered. I don't remember what happened after that. I think I blacked out for a moment. When I came to, the video was gone. The website was closed. My phone was working again, and the screen was showing nothing but a blank page. Max was still sitting next to me, staring at the spot where the video had been. "What the hell just happened?" Max whispered, his voice shaking. We didn't talk much after that. I felt like I was still hearing that voice in my head. "You're not alone." I couldn't escape it. I couldn't stop thinking about the message, about the man in the alley. For the next few days, strange things started happening. My phone would ring, but when I answered, there would only be silence. At night, I'd hear footsteps outside my door, soft and slow, like someone was watching me. My computer would act weird, files disappearing, Weird pop-ups showing messages like, "I see you," and "You will find me soon." But the scariest part? It wasn't just the messages or the strange occurrences. It was that I started seeing the man in the alley in my dreams. Every night, he was there, standing in the same spot, staring at me with those lifeless eyes. Sometimes he'd speak. Other times, he'd just point toward the same message. "You will find me again." It wasn't long before I realized that it wasn't just the video that had marked me. I had become part of something I didn't understand. A game, a sick, twisted thing that people like Max and I had gotten pulled into. I couldn't escape it. The videos, the messages, the eerie presence. Everything felt like it was closing in. I started to feel paranoid, like someone was always behind me, waiting to strike. Max and I both started avoiding our devices. We shut everything off, convinced that the only way to stay safe was to cut ourselves off from the internet entirely. But the fear never left. And it was only a matter of time before we realized the worst part. The dark web wasn't just a place to watch videos. It was a place where people could reach out to you. And once you were marked, there was no way out. I don't know what happened to Max. I haven't heard from him in weeks. But I know one thing for sure. If you ever come across a video titled "The Hidden Message," don't watch it. Don't even think about it. Because once you do, you'll never be the same. And whatever's watching you, it'll be waiting. It started on an ordinary Friday night. The type of evening that feels like it will pass with no memory. Just another unremarkable end to a busy week. But little did I know, my life was about to take a terrifying turn. I was at home alone. My parents were out of town for the weekend, and I had the house to myself. It was just past midnight when I found myself scrolling aimlessly through Reddit, looking for something to pass the time. I stumbled upon a thread titled "The Dark Web, Hidden Videos," which, at first, seemed like the kind of thing I would usually scroll past. The thread had a handful of replies, most of them filled with exaggerated warnings and rumors about what people might encounter if they ventured into those corners of the internet. The curiosity, however, started to creep in. I'd always been intrigued by the idea of the dark web, this mysterious, forbidden part of the internet that most people don't dare to visit. I had heard stories about strange videos, bizarre forums, and underground marketplaces where anything could be bought or sold. But none of it ever seemed real to me. It felt like urban legends, like something out of a horror movie. At first, I thought about moving on, but there was one comment that caught my attention. It was written by someone named The Watcher, and it simply read, "I found something you have to see, but be warned, once you watch, you can't unsee it. It's real." I laughed it off, thinking it was just some troll trying to scare people. But something about it felt different. The comment wasn't trying to sell anything or trick anyone. It was just a cryptic message, almost like a warning. That's when I made a mistake. I clicked on the link. I don't know why I did it. It was a stupid decision, and it's one I'll regret for the rest of my life. The link led me to a hidden website, one I had never seen before. It was dark, pitch black with minimal text and images. The homepage was blank, except for one video player in the center of the screen. The video had no title, no description, nothing to indicate what I was about to watch. The URL was strange and long, made up of random letters and numbers. My finger hovered over the play button for a few seconds. I thought about closing the window, but curiosity won. I clicked play. The screen went black for a moment, and I felt a cold shiver run down my spine. A soft, eerie static filled the silence, the kind that made you feel like something wasn't quite right. Then, the screen flickered, and the video began. It started with an old, dimly lit room. The walls were cracked and peeling, with faded wallpaper and a single, broken light bulb hanging from the ceiling. The camera was shaky, as if someone was holding it by hand. It panned across the room slowly, showing the remnants of what looked like an abandoned home. At first, I thought it was just another creepy, low-budget horror video, but something about the atmosphere made my skin crawl. The air felt thick with tension, and I could sense that something was wrong, like there was something hidden just out of view. The camera stopped moving when it focused on a figure sitting in the corner of the room. A man. He was slouched over, his face hidden in shadows, wearing a tattered suit. His hands rested on his knees, fingers twitching occasionally, but he didn't move. There was something strange about his stillness. It was unsettling, almost unnatural. Then, the man slowly raised his head. His eyes, empty, hollow, glowed with a faint, unnatural light. It was like they weren't human at all. They were just dark pits, like something had consumed him completely. His lips curled into a slow, unsettling smile. "You shouldn't be here," the man whispered, his voice raspy and distorted, as if it was coming from far away. I froze. My heart thudded loudly in my chest. The words weren't just disturbing, they felt real. It was like he knew I was watching him, like he was speaking directly to me. I glanced at the screen, my breath catching in my throat. The video felt personal, too real. The man didn't say anything more. Instead, the camera zoomed out, revealing the rest of the room. There, in the center, was a table covered with strange items. Old books, a rusty knife, and something that made my stomach churn. A box. The camera lingered on the box for a moment, and that's when I saw it. The box wasn't empty. It was filled with something. Something wriggling, shifting, as if alive. I didn't want to look, but I couldn't turn away. The camera moved closer to the box, and that's when I saw what it was. A human hand, pale and lifeless, with long, twisted fingers reaching out of the box. The hand twitched, the fingers curling and uncurling, like it was trying to escape. I gasped, and my heart skipped a beat. I wanted to turn off the video, to get away from it, but my body wouldn't respond. It was like I was frozen, my eyes glued to the screen. The man in the corner chuckled, a low, disturbing sound that made my skin crawl. "Do you see it now?" he asked, his voice barely audible. The camera zoomed in on the hand, and I saw something else. Written on the wall behind the man, scrawled in what looked like blood. The message was simple, but it made my blood run cold. "You are next." I couldn't move. I couldn't think. The words echoed in my mind, and for the first time, I felt like I was truly in danger. I wasn't just watching a video anymore. I was part of it. The man's hollow eyes, the blood-stained message. Everything felt so real, so close. Then, just as suddenly as it began, the video cut to black. I was left staring at a blank screen. My heart was pounding in my chest, and I could feel my breath coming in short gasps. I tried to close the window, but it wouldn't respond. My mouse clicked on the X, but nothing happened. The screen remained dark, the faint static buzzing in the background. It was like I was trapped, like the video had taken control of my computer. For what felt like an eternity, nothing changed. The room around me seemed to grow colder, darker, and my mind was racing, wondering what had just happened. Was it just a sick prank? Or had I stumbled upon something far worse? Something real? Finally, the screen flickered and, without warning, a new message appeared. "You shouldn't have watched. You've seen too much." My heart stopped. I couldn't breathe. I tried to tell myself it was a joke, that someone was messing with me, but deep down, I knew it wasn't. This wasn't a random video or a creepy storyline. It was something else, and it was watching me. The next few days were a blur. I couldn't stop thinking about what I'd seen. That man, the hand in the box, the message on the wall. I couldn't shake the feeling that I was being followed, that someone, or something, was watching me. I started to hear strange noises at night. Footsteps, whispers. I would wake up in the middle of the night, drenched in sweat, feeling like something was standing right next to my bed. The worst part? The message kept coming back. At random times, the screen would flash on my computer, showing the same text over and over. "You are next." I tried everything to get rid of it. I deleted the video, cleared my browser history, reset my computer, but nothing worked. The messages kept coming back, always appearing when I least expected them. Then one night, the worst thing happened. I received an email. The subject line read, "You thought you could escape." It was from an anonymous sender. The body of the email contained only a single line of text. "We know where you are." That was when I realized this wasn't just a video. It wasn't just some sick prank or twisted fiction. Whoever or whatever was behind it had access to my life. They knew my name. They knew my address. They knew everything about me. I couldn't escape. Days turned into weeks. The fear became a constant companion. I couldn't sleep. I couldn't go outside without feeling like I was being watched. My phone buzzed with strange messages, random numbers, distorted voices. Every time I checked my email, there was another message from that anonymous sender. And then, one night, it stopped. The messages, the videos, the whispers, they all disappeared. But I couldn't shake the feeling that it wasn't over. I knew, deep down, that I was being watched. I couldn't escape the dark web's grip, and the terror still lingered in the back of my mind, waiting for the next message, the next video, the next warning. If you ever come across a video titled, "You shouldn't have watched," do yourself a favor. Don't click on it. Don't watch it. Because once you do, you'll realize too late that there's no way to escape, and the darkness will find you. It all started with a dare. I know. It sounds like the beginning of one of those creepy, overused horror stories you hear from people at school or on the internet. But trust me, this one was different. This one was real. And the worst part is, I never should have clicked that link. Let me give you some context. My name is Ethan. I'm a 17-year-old high school senior who's always been curious about the things most people avoid. I'd heard rumors about the dark web before. The stories were all over the place. Some said it was a place where anything could be bought or sold, from illegal weapons to stolen credit cards. Others talked about disturbing videos that made people go insane, videos that you couldn't unsee. I thought they were just exaggerations, but a part of me was always intrigued. It started one Friday night when I was at a friend's house. It was late, and we were sitting around the couch, messing with our phones. Most of us were just talking about random things, girls, college plans, and whatever else high school seniors talk about when they should be studying. Then, someone, Jackson of course, mentioned the dark web. "Have you guys ever seen the Red Room?" Jackson asked, a devilish grin on his face. We all laughed, assuming it was just another one of Jackson's attempts to get a rise out of us. He had a reputation for making up creepy stories that would freak us out and leave us with a lingering sense of unease. But this time, he wasn't joking. "No, seriously," Jackson continued. "I've been reading about it. It's this live stream thing on the dark web where people get tortured. It's all real. People actually die on camera. You can watch it happen, and you can even pay to be part of it." The rest of us were silent for a moment, unsure if Jackson was just messing with us or if he was serious. But his eyes told a different story. He was dead serious. He was leaning forward, his fingers tapping the edge of his phone like he was holding something back. "I'll show you," Jackson said finally, and before any of us could protest, he opened his laptop. He typed something into the search bar, and in seconds, the screen was filled with a series of links, some of which looked like they were written in a different language. After a few seconds of scrolling, he clicked on one. We all crowded around the laptop, squinting at the screen. Jackson's face lit up with excitement, and I couldn't tell if it was genuine or if he was just trying to make us uncomfortable. "What's the Red Room?" I asked, my voice shaky. Jackson didn't reply. He just clicked the link and opened a video. The screen was black for a moment, and we waited. Then, it flickered, and a video began to play. It was grainy, almost impossible to make out what was happening at first. The only sound was a faint hum, like static, filling the room. I couldn't see much, just dark shadows and blurry figures. But slowly, the camera adjusted, and I could make out the outline of a small room, dimly lit. The walls were bare, stained with something I couldn't identify, and in the center of the room was a chair. The camera zoomed in, and for the first time, I saw a figure strapped to the chair. At first, I thought it was a prank, some kind of elaborate setup for a horror movie. The figure was still, and I couldn't see their face. Then, someone in the room laughed. The laugh was deep, menacing, and full of malice. It didn't come from the figure in the chair, though. It came from the shadows, from the person behind the camera. The figure in the chair began to stir, and I realized it was a person, a real person. Then, the camera moved again, and a new figure stepped into the frame. A man. He was tall, wearing a dark suit and gloves, and he had a face that seemed too calm, too cold. The man walked toward the person in the chair, who was now shaking, struggling against their restraints. "Please," the person in the chair begged, their voice breaking. "Please, no." I froze. My heart was racing in my chest, and the room felt colder. The man with the cold face didn't say anything. He just reached out and grabbed something from the table beside the chair. It was a knife. The video cut out abruptly. Everyone in the room sat in stunned silence. No one spoke. I looked at Jackson, who had a dark smile on his face, but there was something else in his eyes. It wasn't excitement. It was fear. "I told you it was real," Jackson whispered, his voice barely audible. "That's what the Red Room is. It's not just a video. It's live. You can watch real people die." I wanted to leave. I wanted to run out of the room and never look back, but I couldn't. My mind was reeling, and I couldn't shake the image of the person in the chair. I couldn't unsee it. The desperate look on their face, the pleading, the fear. It all felt too real. "What happens to them?" I asked, barely able to find my voice. Jackson didn't answer. He just closed the laptop and sat back, his face pale. None of us spoke for a long time. We sat in the dark, the only sound the hum of the air conditioning. Eventually, we left Jackson's house, but the images from that video stayed with me. I couldn't stop thinking about it, couldn't stop imagining what might have happened after the video ended. What if it wasn't just a video? What if the person in the chair really was being hurt, really was in danger? What if someone was watching us right now, waiting for us to make a move? I tried to brush it off. I tried to tell myself it was just a sick prank, that no one could actually do something like that. But the next day, I couldn't shake the feeling that something wasn't right. Every time I closed my eyes, I saw that man in the suit, the coldness in his eyes, the way he moved so deliberately toward the person in the chair. The worst part? The video didn't stop. It didn't just go away. A few days later, I received a message. It was a text from an unknown number. "You watched the Red Room. Now it's your turn." I thought it was just someone playing a sick joke. I tried to ignore it, delete the text, and move on. But then, the messages started coming more frequently. Each one was more direct, more threatening. "We know where you are. You're next." And that's when I realized the true horror of what we had seen. The dark web isn't just a place for sick people to watch videos or buy illegal goods. It's a place where they can reach into your life. It's a place where, once you're marked for good. I tried everything to stop the messages. I changed my phone number, deleted all my social media accounts, but nothing worked. The messages kept coming. The threats kept coming. They knew everything. Where I was, who I was, where I went. It was like they were always one step ahead of me. One night, I got a call. It was a distorted voice, unrecognizable, but the words were chilling. "We're watching you, Ethan." I didn't know what to do. I felt trapped, suffocated by the fear of knowing that there was someone out there, someone who knew everything about me. I felt like I couldn't escape. The worst part? The Red Room wasn't just a place. It was an invitation. Once you've seen it, once you've watched someone suffer, you can't unsee it. You become part of the game, whether you want to or not. And I had seen it. That was the last time I felt safe. No matter where I went, no matter how many times I changed my phone number or moved my location, the messages kept coming. The Red Room wasn't just a video anymore. It was a part of my life, a nightmare that followed me everywhere. If you're ever tempted to click a link that promises something like the Red Room, remember my story. You might think it's just another sick joke, just another urban legend, but it's not. The dark web isn't just a place for hidden videos. It's a place where once you're in, there's no way out. And once you've seen it, you'll never escape. It all began with a single click. I'm not proud of how I got involved with the dark web. In fact, if I could go back in time and erase every trace of my curiosity, I would. But that's not how life works, and that's not how mistakes go. Once you see something, you can't unsee it. It was a regular Saturday night when I first stumbled into that dark corner of the internet. I was home alone, my parents out of town for the weekend, and I was bored out of my mind. I had spent the evening scrolling through social media, playing video games, and doing my usual routine. But after a while, everything started to feel dull and lifeless. That's when I remembered something I had heard at school. A few of the older kids had been talking about the dark web. At first, it all sounded like an urban legend. "Oh, I've seen videos of people getting tortured," one of them said. "You can buy anything there, like weapons, drugs, and worse." It all sounded like something straight out of a horror movie. But deep down, I was curious. I needed to know if it was real. After some quick research on my phone, I figured out that you couldn't access the dark web like you would any normal website. You needed special software, something called Tor, that would let you access hidden websites. I'd heard the term onion router tossed around, but I didn't know much beyond that. Still, I was determined to find out for myself. I wasn't exactly the most tech-savvy person, but I figured I could figure it out. It didn't take long to download Tor and get started. The interface was simple, different from the regular browsers I was used to. The moment I opened it, I felt like I had entered another world. It was quiet, unsettling, and full of links that made no sense. Most of the sites were random, full of encrypted text and strange usernames. Some were written in languages I didn't recognize, but in the back of my mind, I couldn't shake the feeling that I was stepping into something dangerous. I didn't know where to start, so I just clicked on the first link that caught my attention. It was called The Hidden Room. The page was almost empty, except for a large black box in the center of the screen. There was no description, no context, just that box. But underneath it, a single line of text read, "Click here to enter." I thought it was strange, but the curiosity kept pulling me in. I clicked it. The moment I did, my heart skipped a beat. The page changed to a new video player, a live stream. The footage was shaky, grainy, and the screen was black and white. The video was being recorded from a camera in the corner of a room, but there was something different about it. The room was dimly lit, with only one small light bulb hanging from the ceiling. The walls were covered in peeling wallpaper, and the floor was dirty, littered with scraps of paper and broken furniture. I couldn't understand why anyone would record a video in such a desolate place. The whole thing felt wrong. The camera zoomed in on the middle of the room, and that's when I saw it. A person, a man, chained to a chair in the center of the room. At first, I couldn't make out much. The video was so blurry that I could barely distinguish his features. But as the camera focused, I saw the man's eyes. His face was bruised, blood dripping from his nose and mouth. He looked terrified. His body was trembling, and he was trying to speak, but no words came out. His mouth moved, but all I could hear was a low, distorted hum. I wanted to look away. I wanted to close the window and pretend I hadn't seen it, but I couldn't. I couldn't stop staring. Then, the camera shifted to reveal a figure standing in the corner of the room. It was a man, dressed in all black, with a mask covering his face. His movements were slow, deliberate. The man in the chair continued to struggle, trying to break free, but it was no use. The masked man stepped forward, carrying something in his hand, a knife. The live stream began to glitch, and I almost thought it was over. I thought maybe this was just a prank, some kind of sick joke meant to scare people. But then I heard the sound. It was faint at first, almost inaudible, but it grew louder. The sound of a blade slicing through flesh. I watched, frozen in terror, as the masked man approached the victim. He raised the knife high, and in a flash, he brought it down. I couldn't breathe. The camera zoomed in on the victim's face, and for a brief moment, I saw the raw fear in his eyes. His mouth opened, but no sound came out. The knife cut deep into his skin, and blood poured from the wound. The video was too much. My mind was racing. I wanted to scream, to turn away, but my body wouldn't move. The man in the chair was now screaming, a muffled cry that echoed through the room, and it felt like his pain was seeping through the screen, filling my own head with the horrors he was experiencing. But then, something else happened. The screen froze. The video cut to black, and a message appeared on the screen. "You've seen too much. Now it's your turn." My blood ran cold. I couldn't breathe. I couldn't think. My heart was pounding so hard I thought it might burst from my chest. I tried to close the browser, but it wouldn't let me. My mouse wouldn't respond, and no matter how many times I clicked the X in the corner of the screen, it stayed open. The text remained on the screen, taunting me, telling me that it was too late to escape. I stared at the message for what felt like an eternity, my fingers frozen on the keyboard. Then, the phone rang. I didn't recognize the number. My hands were shaking as I answered it, my voice barely above a whisper. "Hello?" There was silence on the other end for a few seconds, then a low, distorted voice spoke. "You watched. You saw it. Now, we're coming for you. The phone went dead. I sat there in disbelief, staring at my screen. My entire body was frozen with fear, and I felt a cold sweat running down my back. My hands were shaking uncontrollably, and I could feel my breath coming in shallow gasps. But the nightmare wasn't over. The next day, things got worse. I received more calls, each one more disturbing than the last. They were always from unknown numbers, and the voices on the other end were always the same: deep, distorted, and threatening. Every time I picked up the phone, the message was clear: "We're coming for you." The worst part was that it didn't stop. The calls came every hour, each one more urgent and more menacing. But the messages didn't just stay on my phone. They started showing up everywhere, on my social media accounts, in my email inbox, even on random websites I visited. It felt like I was being hunted, and no matter what I did, there was no way to stop it. I tried contacting the authorities, but when I explained what had happened, they didn't believe me. They thought I was making it up. No one took me seriously, and every attempt to get help felt like a waste of time. And that's when I realized something terrifying. I was not the first person to fall into this trap. The dark web isn't just a place for sick people to watch videos. It's a place where lives are destroyed, where people are manipulated, where the line between reality and horror is blurred. The people who run these sick, twisted sites don't care about who they hurt. They just want to create fear. And once you've seen their videos, you become part of their gang. The calls stopped eventually, but the messages didn't. I continued to get texts, and I continued to get strange, encrypted emails. There was no escape. The dark web had marked me, and the only thing I could do was wait. To this day, I don't know who was behind it all. I don't know if it was some kind of elaborate prank, or if it was something more sinister. But I do know one thing. Once you step into the dark web, you're never truly safe again. The things you see, the things you witness, they stay with you forever. And once you've been chosen, there's no turning back. So if you ever hear someone talk about the dark web, remember my story. You might think it's just a rumor, just another creepy legend, but it's real. And if you make the mistake of venturing into that world, you might just find yourself in a place where there's no escape and no one to help you. Because once you click, you're in, and there's no getting out. It's funny how a simple mistake can change everything. How a single moment of curiosity can lead you down a path you'll never be able to escape. Let me explain. My name is Ava, and I'm 18. I live in a small town where everyone knows everyone else, and things usually stay quiet. The only excitement in my life came from late-night chats with my friends, scrolling through social media, and binge-watching movies on weekends. But one night, everything changed, and I ended up deep in the heart of the dark web. It wasn't something I planned to do, not at first. It started when my friend, Sarah, sent me a link. We were talking about horror movies, and she had mentioned something that piqued my interest: the hidden videos on the dark web. She said there were rumors of untraceable live streams, videos that no one was supposed to see, videos of people, real people, caught in terrifying situations. But she warned me not to go looking for them. She said once you saw something like that, you couldn't unsee it. But, like most things, the idea stuck with me. The more I thought about it, the more I became obsessed with the idea of finding one of these videos. Was it real? Or was it just another internet legend? Could I find something truly terrifying? Maybe there was some satisfaction in seeing the truth behind the rumors. I wasn't sure, but I had to know. I didn't want to tell Sarah that I planned to look for the dark web videos. I didn't want her to think I was foolish, but my curiosity took over. I did some research online, learning about Tor, the encrypted browser that gave access to the hidden parts of the web. I felt a bit nervous, but I had already seen articles about it, heard stories from people online who swore they'd ventured there. It wasn't going to be that bad, right? I downloaded Tor. It took a while, longer than I expected. The idea of entering a different world felt surreal, like I was crossing a line that I couldn't come back from. I still didn't understand all the warnings people gave about the dark web, but I was already too deep into it. The moment Tor finished installing, I opened it. The browser was simple, just a dark screen with a search bar. At first, I didn't know where to go, but I quickly found myself clicking on random links. Some led to strange forums, others to encrypted chat rooms that didn't make sense. Then, I stumbled across one link titled, The Whispering Code. I clicked it without thinking. The page that opened was blank at first, except for a message. Enter if you seek the truth. I felt my pulse quicken. I didn't know what it meant, but something about the wording hooked me. Without hesitating, I pressed enter. The page flickered for a moment, and then a dark screen appeared with a small, unmarked video player in the center. The video was live. I had no idea what to expect, but what happened next still haunts me. The video opened on a small room, dimly lit, with a single chair sitting in the center. A man was sitting in the chair, his face obscured by shadows. There was a low hum in the background, a sound that felt unsettling. The man's hands were tied behind the chair, and he was muttering something. His voice was shaky, hoarse, but I couldn't make out the words. He seemed to be trying to speak, to call out, but the sound distorted as if something, or someone, was blocking him. I leaned in closer, my eyes fixated on the screen. Then, another figure appeared, stepping slowly into the frame. This one was different, dressed in black from head to toe, a mask covering their face. They didn't speak. They didn't need to. The figure approached the man in the chair with slow, deliberate steps. I could feel my heartbeat in my throat. The person in black reached out, grabbed a metal tool from a table nearby, and held it up. The man in the chair was still trying to speak, but now his voice was growing weaker, as if he was slipping into unconsciousness. I couldn't look away. I was frozen. The figure in black raised the tool, and in a flash, there was a sharp, sickening sound. The man in the chair jerked violently, his body convulsing in pain, and then the video cut out. Just like that, the screen went black. My heart was pounding. My hands were shaking. I wanted to close the window, to shut it all down, but I couldn't. I couldn't tear my eyes away from the empty screen. The message that followed sent a chill through my body. You've seen it now. The code has marked you. Panic hit me all at once. I felt lightheaded, my breath coming in short gasps. I tried to exit the site, but again, nothing worked. The window wouldn't close. I hit Ctrl+W repeatedly, but it stayed open. Then, a strange noise started coming from my computer. A soft whispering. At first, it was so faint I thought I was imagining it, but it grew louder, clearer. I could hear words, but they were scrambled, like a foreign language I couldn't recognize. The whispers seemed to echo, bouncing off the walls of my room. The words sounded familiar, but my brain couldn't process them. Suddenly, a text message popped up on my phone. The number was unknown, but I recognized the strange code at the beginning of the message. It was the same code that had appeared on the website. We see you. I dropped my phone in shock, my fingers trembling. What was happening? I felt like I was being watched, like something was lurking in the corners of my room. But when I turned to look, everything was still. I forced myself to stand up and walk over to the laptop. Maybe if I turned it off, everything would go away. Maybe if I just forgot about it, I could put the nightmare behind me. But when I opened the lid, there it was again. The whispering. The video was back. The same dimly lit room. The same masked figure. But this time, the man in the chair wasn't struggling. He wasn't even alive. He was gone, his body motionless, his eyes wide open, staring at the screen. The camera zoomed in, and I saw something I hadn't noticed before. A symbol carved into the man's skin, glowing faintly in the dark. The screen flickered again, and the figure in black spoke for the first time, their voice low and distorted. You are marked. The code is yours now. You belong to the whispering. I tried to close the browser once more, but my computer wouldn't respond. It was as if I had no control over it anymore. It felt like the dark web had found its way into my life, into my very soul. I felt trapped. The whispering continued. It was coming from everywhere now. From my laptop, from my phone, from the walls, from inside my head. The more I tried to push it out, the louder it grew. The more I tried to escape, the closer it seemed to get. The next few days were a blur. I couldn't sleep. I couldn't focus on anything. The whispers didn't stop. They were everywhere, whispering in the hallways, in my room, in the dead of night. I kept hearing that same cryptic message. You are marked. You belong. I tried to tell my friends, but they thought I was just overreacting. Sarah, especially thought I was imagining things. She didn't understand. How could she? She hadn't seen what I had seen. But the whispers didn't stop, and neither did the messages. The whispering code will find you. I don't know what they meant by that, but I knew something was out there, watching me. Something tied to the dark web. Something that had seen what I had seen, and now it wasn't going to let me go. It's been weeks since that night, and I still don't feel safe. Every time I close my eyes, I can still hear the whispers. Every time I open my laptop or check my phone, there's that message. The code has found you. If you're ever curious about the dark web, about those hidden videos, don't go looking for them. Because once you see them, they see you too. And once you're marked, there's no escaping the whispering code. You'll never be free again. And neither will I. I never thought a simple click of a button could change my life forever. I'm Jake, a 17-year-old high school senior. I live in a pretty quiet suburban neighborhood. Life was usual for me. School, video games, and hanging out with friends. Everything was ordinary until one night when I made a decision that would lead me down a terrifying path. It all started when I was talking to my friend, Liam, at school. He was one of those guys who always seemed to have the most interesting stories, often bordering on creepy or strange. One day, he mentioned the dark web. I had heard about it before, but I thought it was just a myth, something made up by people who like to tell scary stories. But Liam swore that it was real. "Man, you don't even know," he said, leaning in closer. "The stuff you can find on there is crazy. People have gone missing after looking at videos. And some of them, they just disappear." I laughed it off at first. It all sounded like some dark corner of the internet designed to scare people. But there was something about the way Liam talked about it. He wasn't trying to be funny, and he wasn't exaggerating. He seemed almost too calm, like he knew something I didn't. Maybe it was my own curiosity, or maybe it was just the desire to prove him wrong. But that night, I found myself looking up how to access the dark web. I didn't want to ask Liam for help. I figured I could figure it out myself. So I spent the next hour researching. After some searching, I found out that the dark web could only be accessed using Tor, a special browser. I downloaded it, and when it finished installing, I opened it with a nervous excitement. The moment I saw the black screen with the search bar, I felt a rush of adrenaline. I didn't know what I was looking for. I didn't know if I was even looking for anything in particular. But then I remembered Liam's words, and I typed in the first link I found. It was called The Room with No Exit. The website loaded slowly, and the page was completely dark, except for a single line of text in the center of the screen. "Enter if you dare." My hands shook as I clicked it. Almost immediately, the screen changed. A video appeared, with no description, just a black background and the faintest hint of a dimly lit room. The camera was shaky, as though it was handheld, and the image was blurry at first. But slowly, it began to focus, and I could make out what looked like an empty room. The walls were painted a dull gray, and the floor was covered in dirt and dust. There was a single chair in the center of the room, and nothing else. The room was completely silent except for the occasional sound of breathing. Then, the door creaked open. I wasn't sure if I was imagining it or if the sound was part of the video, but I could feel my heart race. A figure stepped into the room. They were wearing a black hoodie, and their face was obscured by shadows. The figure walked toward the chair in the center of the room, sat down, and stared into the camera. It felt like the figure was looking directly at me. I froze. I couldn't take my eyes off the screen. I wanted to look away, but I couldn't. My body refused to move. The figure didn't speak. They just sat there, still and silent. The video played for what felt like hours, but the figure didn't move an inch. There was something so chilling about how still they were. Their presence in the room seemed to distort the very air around them, making everything feel thick and suffocating. The longer I watched, the more uneasy I felt. Suddenly, the figure stood up. It was quick, too quick, and I jumped back in shock. The person walked to the far side of the room, where I noticed for the first time that there was a small, wooden door. The door wasn't visible earlier in the video, but now it was there, just barely illuminated by the dim light from above. The figure approached the door, grabbed the handle, and twisted it. But the door didn't open. I couldn't explain it. There was something about the door that felt wrong. like it wasn't supposed to be there, like it had always been locked. The figure tried again, tugging harder, but it wouldn't budge. And then, the whispering began. At first, it was faint. I thought it was just a part of the video's audio, but as the whispering grew louder, I realized something was very wrong. It sounded like multiple voices, distorted and garbled. The words were unintelligible, but the tone was unmistakable. Fear, desperation, and something darker, something threatening. The figure froze. And that's when I heard the second set of whispers, this time coming from the other side of the room. It was almost like a command. The whispers were saying something I couldn't understand, but I could tell they were urging the figure to do something. The figure didn't hesitate. They turned back to the camera and slowly began walking toward it, step by step, until they were standing right in front of it. The whispers grew louder, more frantic. I could feel a cold sweat forming on my neck. Suddenly, the figure raised their hand, and for the first time, I saw what they were holding, a knife. It wasn't a large knife. It wasn't even a particularly menacing one, but something about the way the figure moved with it, something about the way the blade gleamed in the dim light, made my stomach churn. I didn't know why, but I felt like something terrible was about to happen. The figure didn't speak. They just lifted the knife slowly, carefully, and without a second thought, plunged it into their own chest. I gasped, my hand flying to my mouth. The figure's body jerked back in a violent spasm. Blood splattered onto the floor, and the room was filled with the sound of the figure's heavy breathing, mixed with the echoes of the whispering voices. The figure collapsed to the ground, twitching and convulsing. The camera went black. My heart was racing, and I felt a wave of nausea hit me. I quickly closed the browser, but it wasn't over. A message popped up on my screen. The room is never empty. You have been chosen. I froze in terror. I didn't understand what was happening. I felt dizzy, disoriented. I wanted to scream, but my throat felt tight. My hands were shaking so much that I could barely type, but I quickly pulled up a new tab and tried to search for answers. The words on the screen didn't make sense. What was the room with no exit? Who were those people? And why did it feel like I was in danger? The next few days were a blur. I couldn't sleep. Every time I closed my eyes, I saw the figure, the blood, the knife. The whispers didn't stop. They were always there, lingering in the back of my mind, like an ominous warning I couldn't escape. I kept hearing the words, "You have been chosen." The worst part? It wasn't just the nightmares. Every time I looked at my phone or laptop, I noticed strange things happening. Files would appear and disappear. Strange messages would pop up on my screen, like someone was trying to get my attention. My phone started buzzing with calls and texts from unknown numbers. The messages were always the same. "We know where you are." I felt like I was being hunted. And then, it happened. One night, as I sat alone in my room, the lights flickered. The room grew cold, and I felt a strange presence, like I wasn't alone. I turned to my computer, and there it was, an email from an unknown address. The subject line simply read, "The room with no exit." My hands trembled as I clicked open the email. The screen was filled with a new video. The room, the same room from the first video, but this time, there was something new. There was a message written on the wall, scrawled in red. "Now you are part of it." I don't know how long I sat there, staring at the screen, too terrified to move. I wanted to run, to throw my laptop out the window, but I couldn't. I was trapped in a nightmare, and I couldn't wake up. It's been weeks now, and the whispers are still with me. The emails keep coming. I've changed my phone number, deleted all my social media accounts, and tried to stay off the internet altogether. But no matter what I do, it's like the dark web has marked me. It's like I'm stuck in the room with no exit, and I can't escape. So, I'm telling you this, hoping that maybe, just maybe, my story will serve as a warning. If you're ever tempted to venture into the dark web, if you ever think about clicking on those hidden links, remember my story. Once you see what's in the room with no exit, there's no going back. You'll never be the same. And who knows, maybe one day, you'll be the next one who gets chosen. I've always been the curious type, the one who couldn't resist looking deeper when everyone else said, "Don't go there," whether it was about strange stories, forbidden places, or something people said should never be explored. I had a knack for digging into the unknown. But I didn't realize that one day, my curiosity would take me to a place that would haunt me forever. It all began a few months ago. I was 17 at the time, just a regular high school student, spending my nights doing what most teenagers do. Browsing social media, watching videos, playing games. Nothing out of the ordinary. But one evening, a friend from school, Mark, sent me a link. He didn't give any context, no warning, just a link in a chat message that said, "You need to see this. It's real." At first, I thought it was one of those viral pranks or some strange video from the darker corners of the internet. Mark had always been the type to send creepy stuff, so I wasn't too surprised. But there was something about his message that caught my attention. He seemed so serious, like he wasn't joking this time. I clicked the link. It took me to a website I had never seen before. The page was dark, with barely any text, just a streaming video player. It had no title, no description, just a number of viewers currently watching. What caught my attention was the date on the page. The stream was live. I hesitated for a moment. I wasn't sure if I should continue, but curiosity got the better of me. I pressed play. The first thing I noticed was how dark the video was. The screen showed a dimly lit room with black walls, and there was no furniture. Nothing except for a single, large television screen on the wall. The camera angle was shaky, as though the person holding the camera was moving around. It looked almost like a hidden camera feed, but I couldn't understand why someone would be filming this. Then, I saw the figure. A man, dressed in a dark hoodie, sitting on the floor in front of the TV. His face was hidden in shadow, but I could tell he wasn't alone. There were several people in the background, sitting still in chairs, all facing the television screen. They were all perfectly still, not moving a muscle. It felt unnerving. There was something about their silence, about their lack of emotion, that made me feel uncomfortable. I watched in silence for a few moments, trying to understand what was going on. The camera zoomed in on the television screen, and that's when I saw it. The screen was showing another room, an identical one to the one the people were sitting in. It was almost like a reflection, except there were no people in the second room, just an empty space. The eerie part? The television screen in the live video was showing exactly what was happening in that second room. It was like someone was mirroring the first room, but in real time. That's when the whispers started. It was subtle at first, barely audible, but I could hear them. Low, hushed voices, like a conversation happening just out of my reach. I leaned in closer to my screen, trying to make sense of what was happening. I heard one voice say something, but the words were too distorted to understand. The camera in the video started to shake more, like whoever was filming was starting to panic. The man in the hoodie on the floor stood up quickly, and the people in the background started to move, too. It was as if they were being controlled, like puppets, and that made my skin crawl. They weren't acting like normal people. They weren't making any noise or gestures, just moving in sync with each other, like a perfectly orchestrated dance. I felt a strange feeling of dread growing in my stomach. The camera zoomed out, showing the room in its entirety. The people were still moving, but now there was something else in the room with them. A shadowy figure, standing at the door. The figure was tall, and I couldn't make out its face, but I could see its silhouette clearly. It was as if the figure wasn't fully there, like it was existing between worlds. The way it moved, the way it shifted in and out of the shadows, it looked almost unreal. I wasn't sure if I was imagining things, but the longer I watched, the more convinced I became that something was wrong. The room in the video had no exit. The people didn't seem to be able to leave, and the shadowy figure seemed to be controlling them, guiding their movements. Then, the stream flickered. The screen went black for a moment, and when it came back, the camera angle was different. It wasn't in the same room anymore. The video was showing the outside of the building, a narrow alley lit by a single streetlight. But there was something strange about the scene. The alley looked familiar to me, almost like it was somewhere I had been before. That's when I realized I knew that alley. It was a few blocks from my house. My heart started pounding in my chest. I quickly checked the viewer count. There were only a few people watching, but my thoughts were racing. Why was this video live? How was I able to see it? And why did it feel so familiar? The camera panned to the end of the alley, where a figure was standing. A man, dressed in black, was facing the camera. He stood still for a moment, not moving, then slowly turned and started walking down the alley. I felt an instinctive urge to stop watching, but I couldn't. My body was frozen. The video cut again, and this time, it showed a new scene. A room, this time filled with monitors, showing different angles of various rooms, including the one from the earlier video. A single person sat in front of the monitors, watching them intently. I could see their hands moving, clicking through different camera feeds, but I couldn't see their face. They wore gloves, and their movements were quick and calculated, almost robotic. The figure on the monitor turned to face the camera, and I saw their face for the first time. It was pale, featureless, like a mask, smooth, with no eyes, no nose, no mouth. Just a blank, white face. I jumped back in shock, my heart racing. My phone vibrated in my pocket, and I nearly screamed. I pulled it out, but there was no message, no notification, just a call from an unknown number. I didn't answer it, but as I stared at my screen, I noticed something strange. The number was the same as the one on the video feed. I didn't know how to explain it, but it felt like the video, the stream, was connected to me. It wasn't just a random feed, it was targeting me. Somehow, it had found me, and now it was watching me in real time. I closed the laptop as fast as I could, trying to breathe through the panic that was taking over me. I needed to get away from the screen, to clear my head, but it was already too late. That night, I couldn't sleep. Every time I closed my eyes, I saw that figure in the mask, staring at me with those empty, white eyes. I kept hearing the whispers in the back of my mind, the same low voices from the video. I tried to tell Mark, but he didn't respond. It was as if he had disappeared completely. The more I thought about it, the more convinced I became that the whole thing wasn't just a prank. It wasn't just some random video or hidden feed. It was something darker, something that wasn't meant to be seen, and I had just stumbled into it. Over the next few days, strange things started happening. My phone rang constantly with unknown numbers, and every time I answered, I could hear breathing on the other end. Sometimes, I'd hear faint whispers, but nothing ever clear enough to make sense of. I could feel eyes on me, even when I was alone. It was as if someone, or something, was following me. I tried to go to the police, but they brushed me off. They said it was probably a prank, just some sick person with too much time on their hands. But I knew it wasn't. I knew I was in danger. And the worst part? The video never stopped. Every time I went online, I found new streams, new feeds, all connected to that same mask-wearing figure. They weren't just watching, they were waiting. The last time I checked, I saw a new video titled, "It's Too Late." I didn't watch it. I couldn't. But I knew, deep down, that whatever it was, whatever had been following me, was getting closer. And maybe one day, it will find you too. I've always been careful about what I click on, especially when it comes to the internet. The thought of ending up on the dark web, where no one can hear you scream and where secrets are buried, terrified me. But there was one night, just one night, that changed everything. It all started when my friend Sophie sent me a link. Sophie and I had always been close, and while she wasn't into creepy stories, she had a strange fascination with anything that was off-limits on the internet. I remember her saying something about a hidden stream she stumbled upon. I didn't think much of it at first. Sophie loved teasing me about the things she found online. Strange, eerie videos, strange forums, but I always brushed it off. That was, until the night she sent me the link. I remember the exact words of her message. "You have to see this. It's real, and it's not like anything I've ever seen." Now, I didn't know what she meant by real. She had a tendency to exaggerate, so I wasn't expecting much, but I opened the link anyway. A part of me thought it was another one of her pranks. Maybe she had found a scary video on YouTube or some obscure website that was meant to look creepy. The link led me to a black screen with a simple text, "Welcome. Watch if you dare." It had no description, no title, just a video player with a strange timestamp at the top of the screen. The timestamp was marked with "Live" beside it, indicating that the video was streaming right at that moment. Curiosity got the better of me, and I clicked on the play button. The video started immediately, but the first thing I noticed was the sound. It wasn't a normal video. There was a low hum in the background, almost like the sound of a machine running. The screen was dark at first, too dark to make out anything. But after a few seconds, it cleared up. The camera slowly focused, revealing a small, dimly lit room. The room was small, with gray walls that looked old and worn. A single bare light bulb hanging from the ceiling. The air was thick with dust, and I could see cobwebs in the corners of the room. The furniture was sparse, just a single wooden chair in the middle of the room, its legs scraped and uneven. There was a small table beside the chair with a strange, metallic object on it, but the camera never focused on it long enough for me to figure out what it was. I leaned in closer, unsure of what I was about to witness. The camera angle shifted slightly, and then I saw them, the people in the room. There were 5 of them, all sitting silently in the same position. They were facing the camera, their bodies stiff and unmoving. Each person was wearing a plain white shirt, and they all had their eyes wide open, staring straight ahead with blank expressions. The worst part? They were all breathing, but it was so shallow and slow that it didn't sound like normal breathing. It was more like a strained, mechanical inhalation. I was frozen. I wasn't sure what I was watching, but it didn't feel right. There was something about the stillness of the room, the way the people were positioned that made my skin crawl. They were too still. It was as if they weren't alive, or at least not in the way we understand living. The camera zoomed in on one of the figures, a man in his mid-30s. His face was pale, his hair disheveled, but what caught my attention were his eyes. His eyes were wide open, unblinking, but there was something off about them. They weren't normal. They were glassy, like they had been staring at something for too long. Something unnatural. I wanted to stop watching, but something kept me glued to the screen. Maybe it was the eerie calmness of the video, or maybe it was the strange sense of dread creeping into my bones. Then, the lights flickered. For a brief moment, the screen went black, and I could hear faint whispers in the distance. They were unintelligible, but they sounded like multiple voices speaking at once. The hum in the background grew louder. When the lights came back on, the room was no longer empty. A figure stood in the doorway. I couldn't see its face, but I could see its silhouette, a tall, slender shape wearing a long black cloak. The figure stood still for a moment, then slowly stepped into the room, its movement unnervingly slow. It walked toward the center, where the 5 people were sitting. The camera angle changed again, focusing on the floor, and I noticed something that made my heart race. There were dark stains on the ground, almost like blood. I felt my stomach turn. The figure didn't speak. It didn't move much, but its presence was suffocating. The whispers grew louder, now clearly coming from the direction of the door. The people in the room didn't move. They didn't acknowledge the figure's presence at all. They just kept staring, unblinking, into the distance. Then, something even worse happened. The figure reached out and placed a hand on the shoulder of one of the people in the room, a young woman. She was in her late 20s, with long dark hair. As soon as the figure touched her, her body jerked slightly, and her breathing stopped for a moment. Then, her head tilted to the side, her eyes still wide open, as if she was seeing something that no one else could. The worst part was that she didn't make a sound. She didn't scream, or gasp, or react in any way. It was like she was under some kind of spell. I tried to look away, but I couldn't. The video had a hold on me now, and I couldn't break free from it. I was terrified, but I was also mesmerized. The figure withdrew its hand, and the woman's body slumped slightly. The other 4 people didn't react at all. Then, the figure turned to face the camera, and for the first time, I saw its face, or rather, its lack of face. The face was completely smooth, like a blank, featureless mask. It stared directly at the camera, and I swear, for a split second, I felt like it was looking at me, like it knew I was watching. The whispering voices in the background grew louder, and then, just as quickly as it had begun, the figure turned and walked out of the room. The camera followed the figure briefly, showing it walk down a hallway, but the moment it turned a corner, the screen went black. The whispers faded away. For a moment, I was left in complete silence, my heart pounding in my chest. I sat there, staring at the screen, trying to make sense of what I had just witnessed. What had I just seen? Was it real? Or was it some kind of twisted film meant to scare people? I tried to dismiss it, but I couldn't shake the feeling that something was wrong. It felt too real. The eeriness of it all, the silence in the room, the figure with the blank face. It wasn't something I could easily forget. I couldn't sleep that night. Every time I closed my eyes, I saw those empty, staring faces. The worst part, however, came the following morning. I woke up to a message from Sophie. The message was simple. Did you see it? You can't just watch it once. It's still going. I was confused. What did she mean by still going? I opened my phone to check, and to my horror, I saw the same link she had sent me earlier. But this time, the title had changed. It now read, The Silent Watcher, Live Stream 2. I clicked on it, my heart racing. When the video loaded, it wasn't the same room. It was a different place entirely, my bedroom. I saw myself, sitting in front of my computer, watching the video. The camera angle was from the corner of my room, hidden in the shadows, watching me watch the screen. My stomach dropped. I wasn't alone in the room, and the worst part was, I couldn't see who was standing behind me. I quickly closed the laptop, but the damage was done. The video had already found me, and I knew that it wasn't just some random thing I stumbled upon. It was targeting me, and I realized something horrifying. Whatever was on the other side of that screen wasn't done with me yet. It was still watching. I still don't know how it all works or who, or what, is behind the mask. But one thing's for sure. If you ever get a message from someone with a link to a hidden stream, think twice before clicking it. Because once you see it, it will find you. I should have known better than to go looking. I should have known that some doors are better left unopened. But once I started, I couldn't stop. I'm not the type to scare easily, but that was before I found something I wish I never had. It all started when my friend Chris sent me a link late one night. Chris wasn't your typical friend. He was into conspiracy theories, the weird side of the internet, and had a knack for finding things that were hidden deep in the corners of the web. He was the type to send me strange links now and then, but I always ignored them. Until that night, he messaged me at around midnight. Check this out. You won't believe it. It's real. That was all he wrote. No explanation, no context. Just a link. The curiosity was too much for me. It had been a long week of school and stress, and I thought, why not? Maybe it would be something funny, or something that could give me a good scare. It wasn't the first time Chris sent me something strange, so I clicked the link, expecting nothing more than some creepy video or a weird conspiracy theory. The link led me to a page with a black background and white text. There were no pop-ups, no ads, just a simple message. Watch if you dare. Live feed starting now. The page was bare, except for a single video player in the center. The timestamp read live, 12:05 a.m. It felt strange, like the page was waiting for something. I thought about closing it, but there was a nagging feeling in the back of my mind, urging me to click play. I clicked. The video started instantly, but the screen was black for a few moments before it flickered to life. The camera angle was odd, almost like it was from the perspective of someone hiding in a corner. It was hard to make out much at first, just a dark, cluttered room. There were no lights on, just the soft glow of the screen casting faint shadows across the room. Then, the camera moved. It swung around to reveal a man. He was sitting at a desk, hunched over a computer, his face lit by the harsh light of the monitor in front of him. I couldn't see his face clearly at first. His back was turned, but I could tell he was alone. I figured it was just some amateur stream, a person sharing whatever they were doing at that moment. But then the camera zoomed in on the screen in front of him. I could see that the man was watching a series of videos, flipping through them with a mouse as though he were searching for something specific. His movements were mechanical, as if he was repeating a process over and over again, almost like he was stuck in some kind of trance. Suddenly, he clicked on a video and sat back. The video loaded, and what appeared on the screen made my stomach drop. It was a live feed, just like the one I was watching, but it was different. The room was darker, and the camera was shaky, like it had been moved or knocked over. The walls were bare, and there were strange symbols scribbled on the floor, like someone had been marking the area with chalk. At first, I thought it was just a horror-themed prank, but then I noticed something odd. The camera was slowly moving on its own, like it was being controlled remotely. I could hear faint noises in the background, whispers almost, but they were too quiet to make out. It felt like I was intruding on something, like I wasn't supposed to be watching this. The camera panned to a dark corner of the room, and that's when I saw it, a figure. It was standing in the corner, barely visible, but I could tell it was tall, wearing a dark hoodie that obscured its face. The figure wasn't moving, just standing there, staring. I felt a chill run down my spine. The man at the desk didn't seem to notice the figure in the video. He clicked through more videos, each one more disturbing than the last. They were all similar. Empty rooms, strange figures lurking in the shadows, the eerie silence broken only by the soft buzzing of the camera. But one of the videos made my heart race. The camera was focused on a small room, its walls painted white. There was no furniture, just a bare light bulb hanging from the ceiling. The floor was covered in what looked like dust and dirt. As the camera zoomed in, I could make out something in the center of the room, a small cage. Inside the cage was a woman. She was sitting in the corner, her face bruised and scratched. Her eyes were wide open, and she was staring at the camera, but there was no expression on her face, just emptiness. She didn't move, didn't speak. She just stared. I had to look away. My hands were shaking as I pulled the mouse over to close the window, but I couldn't. Something inside me kept me glued to the screen, my mind racing with questions. Why was this happening? What was the purpose of these videos? Suddenly, the man in the dark room stood up. I could see him clearly now. His face was pale, his eyes wide and frantic, like he was searching for something. He moved quickly around the room, as if he was looking for something he couldn't find. I didn't know what he was searching for, but the tension in the air was palpable. Then, the camera cut again. The next video was different. It was from a different room, but the lighting was the same, dim, almost like it had been intentionally set to make everything look off. There was a woman on the floor, her hands bound. She was struggling against the ropes, but it didn't seem to matter. Her eyes were wide, her face twisted in fear. She kept glancing toward the door, as if she was waiting for something or someone. The figure in the dark hoodie appeared again, standing in the doorway. It was tall, unnaturally tall, and its face was still hidden in the shadow of its hood. The woman seemed to notice it too, her breath quickening. She tried to scream, but no sound came out. I could see her lips moving, but it was like the room was suffocating her voice. And then the video cut off, just like that. I froze. For a moment, everything was still. The room was silent. I could hear my own breath in the darkness of my room. My heart was pounding, and I felt sick. It wasn't just a video. It was real. The man at the desk in the stream wasn't done. He clicked on another video, and I leaned in to see what was next. But this one was different. The feed was fuzzy, the image distorted. The sound was nothing but static, broken up by random bursts of distorted noise. The video finally cleared up, and what I saw made me gasp in horror. It was my room. I didn't know how, I didn't know why, but the camera was in my own room, and I was sitting at my desk, staring at my computer screen. I couldn't breathe. I wasn't imagining it. There I was, exactly as I was sitting right now, but something was wrong. Something was off. The room was darker than it should have been, and there was a strange noise in the background, like a low hum. But worse than that, there was something moving in the corner of the screen. A figure. It was tall, wearing a dark hoodie, the same figure from the other videos. I was paralyzed. My hands were shaking as I tried to move the mouse, but my fingers couldn't find the button. I watched, helpless, as the figure stepped out from the shadows in my room. It walked slowly, almost deliberately, until it reached my desk, and then it stopped. The figure stood right behind me, just inches away from where I was sitting, staring at the back of my head. I could feel its presence even though I couldn't see it. I wanted to scream, to run, to do anything, but I was frozen, trapped in this nightmare. Then, the video cut off. I slammed my laptop shut, my heart racing. I sat in complete darkness for what felt like hours, trying to catch my breath. My mind was spinning. I couldn't comprehend what I had just seen. It wasn't possible, was it? How could anyone have known about my room, my computer, my life? It wasn't just a random video feed. It was watching me. The next morning, I woke up to a message from Chris. You saw it, right? The forgotten feed? It's real, man. They're watching us all. I never replied. I couldn't. Because now, I knew. It wasn't over. Whatever I had stumbled upon, it was following me, and it would keep watching. And maybe one day, it will find you too. I've always been the curious type, the kind of person who asks too many questions and pokes around where they shouldn't. That's probably how I ended up in the mess I'm in now. It all started a few months ago when I got into an argument with my friend Marcus about the dark web. He was obsessed with it, always talking about it, always hyping it up like it was some kind of treasure hunt. I didn't get it. I mean, who in their right mind would go looking for danger online? But after a long night of listening to his stories, something inside me snapped. I decided to see what all the fuss was about. Marcus had told me about hidden streams, these live feeds you could supposedly find in the deep corners of the internet, the kind of streams no one would dare talk about. He said they were like a live version of the creepy videos you'd find on YouTube, only darker, more twisted, and much harder to find. He told me to be careful, but curiosity got the better of me. I wasn't looking for anything specific, just browsing, clicking through links on some sketchy forums. Hours went by, and I was about to give up, thinking Marcus had just been exaggerating. But then, I saw it. The link was buried deep, under a thread titled, "For those who really want to see the truth." I clicked it. The page that loaded was completely black, and the only thing on it was a single video player. It had no title, no description, just a timestamp that said, "Live feed, 12:31 a.m." My heart skipped a beat. The fact that it said live made me pause. Most of the time, these things were recorded. Was this actually happening right now? I sat there for a moment, staring at the screen, wondering if I should turn back. But curiosity, as it often does, got the better of me. I clicked play. The video started instantly, and for a split second, I saw nothing but black. I thought it had glitched, but then the image slowly began to clear. It was a room, dimly lit, with peeling wallpaper and an old wooden floor. There was a desk in the middle of the room, covered in papers and books, but no one was sitting at it. The room was empty, except for the camera that was somehow positioned in the corner, looking down at the scene below. I thought it was just another abandoned place, maybe some weird live stream from a forgotten building. But then the silence was broken by a faint noise, a whispering, barely audible. I couldn't make out the words, but it sounded like more than one voice, layered together. I leaned in closer, trying to make sense of it, when the feed shifted. The camera moved, slowly, as if someone was controlling it remotely. It panned to the left, revealing something that sent a chill through me. There was a figure in the far corner of the room, standing completely still. The person was wearing a long, black cloak, and their face was obscured by a hood. They were just standing there, unmoving, their body barely visible in the low light. I thought it was a person, maybe a stunt or performance art, but the longer I watched, the more unsettled I became. The figure didn't move. It didn't even breathe. It was as though it was a part of the room, a shadow blending into the walls. The whispering grew louder, and I could swear I heard my name being called in the background. Suddenly, the video cut to black. My heart raced. I sat back, blinking in confusion. What had just happened? I quickly checked my internet connection to see if the feed had simply gone offline. But no, the timestamp was still ticking forward, showing 12:33 a.m. The feed was still live. I clicked to resume, and the video came back on. But this time the figure wasn't standing still anymore. It had moved. It was now right in front of the camera, so close that its face was almost touching the lens. And that's when I saw it, the face. It wasn't human. The figure had no features, no eyes, no nose, no mouth. It was smooth, featureless, like a mannequin with a blank expression. My stomach twisted. I couldn't look away. The whispers in the background were louder now, and they were no longer unintelligible. I could hear a distinct voice, low and rasping, saying, "It sees you." The figure tilted its head ever so slightly, and for a moment, I thought I saw something moving in the shadows behind it. A movement so faint I wasn't sure if I was imagining it. But then, the figure spoke. "You shouldn't have watched." I froze. It was clear, unmistakable. The voice came from the thing that had no mouth. My fingers hovered over the keyboard, but I couldn't bring myself to close the window. Something held me there. The camera shifted again, but this time, The view wasn't of the room. Instead, it showed a dark, narrow hallway. The lighting was dim, and there was a door at the end. The figure walked toward the door, its movement jerky and unnatural. I could hear the faint sound of footsteps echoing in the silence. It reached the door, but before it could open it, the feed cut off once more. This time, the video didn't come back. My screen remained blank, and the timestamp froze at 12:45 a.m. I sat there for what felt like an eternity, staring at the screen, unable to process what had just happened. I knew I had to close the window, had to stop watching, but I couldn't make myself move. That voice, those empty eyes, what was it? What did it want? After what seemed like an hour, the screen suddenly flickered back to life. But this time, the video was different. The room was the same, but the figure wasn't there anymore. Instead, the camera was pointed at the desk, and sitting at it was a person. It was me. I sat there in shock, staring at my own face on the screen. How was this even possible? I wasn't in a room that looked anything like that. My hands trembled as I watched myself pick up a piece of paper from the desk. I could see my own movements, but it was like I wasn't controlling them. It was like I was watching from somewhere else, from some other perspective. I wanted to look away, but my eyes were locked on the screen. Then, I saw something that made my blood run cold. The figure, the one with the blank face, appeared behind me in the reflection of the window. It wasn't moving, but it was there, watching. The whispers returned, louder than ever, and this time, I could make out the words. "You've seen too much. Now, you are part of the feed." A cold sweat broke out across my body. I knew that if I didn't shut the computer off now, I would be trapped in this nightmare forever. But my hand was frozen. I couldn't move. Suddenly, the camera jerked. The screen flickered violently, and the figure loomed closer to the camera, its face now inches from the lens. I could hear its breathing, slow and heavy. The whispers turned to laughter, and I could feel the room closing in on me. My heartbeat quickened. I had to get out. But then, as quickly as it had started, the video feed cut out entirely. The screen went dark, and I was left staring at a blank page. I slammed the laptop shut, my hands shaking. The whispers still echoed in my mind, lingering in the silence. The next morning, I woke up to a message from Marcus. "I warned you, man. Don't go looking. It's watching now." I never replied to him. To this day, I don't know how it happened, but I know one thing for sure. I'm being watched. That video feed, whatever it was, still follows me. I hear it in the whispers at night. I see the figure lurking in the corner of my vision. And now, I know the truth. The dark web isn't just a place. It's a doorway, a portal to something far worse than I could have ever imagined. It doesn't just show you things. It traps you. And now, I'm part of it. If you ever find yourself wandering through the dark corners of the web, don't go looking for the truth. Because once you see it, it will find you. And there's no escape. Just remember, it's already watching. It started as an ordinary night. One of those evenings where boredom mixed with insomnia to create a dangerous curiosity. My name is Alex, and I've always had a fascination with the internet's hidden corners. Not because I was into anything illegal or creepy, but because the mystery of it all intrigued me. The dark web, as it's commonly called, felt like the digital equivalent of exploring a haunted house. You knew you shouldn't, but the thrill was irresistible. I wasn't a hacker or anything special, just a college student with too much free time and a knack for finding obscure things online. I had heard stories about hidden websites, disturbing forums, and even live-streamed horrors. I assumed most of it was exaggerated or outright fake. Still, one evening, I decided to dig deeper than ever before. Equipped with a Tor browser and a VPN, I began my search. It started innocently enough. Old forums, outdated message boards, and bizarre websites with cryptic riddles. But as the hours ticked by, I stumbled upon a link buried deep in a discussion thread. The post read, "For those who want to see beyond the veil, Channel X." Curiosity burned through my hesitation. I clicked the link, and the page that loaded was eerily minimalist. A black screen with a single white button that said enter. I hesitated, my finger hovering over the trackpad. Something about the simplicity of the page unnerved me. but I wasn't ready to back down. With a deep breath, I clicked enter. The screen changed, and a live video feed began to play. At first, it was static, lines flickering across the screen like an old VHS tape. Then, the image cleared, revealing a dimly lit room. It looked like a basement, with concrete walls and a single, naked light bulb hanging from the ceiling. The room was empty except for an old wooden chair in the center. The camera was positioned in a fixed angle, pointed directly at the chair. There was no sound, no movement, just the unsettling stillness of the room. I waited, thinking it might be some kind of prank. Minutes passed, and nothing happened. Just as I was about to close the window, the screen flickered. The camera seemed to zoom in slightly, focusing on the chair. That's when I noticed it. There was something on the chair. It wasn't immediately obvious because of the poor lighting, but when I squinted, I saw it. A small, black USB drive sitting in the center of the seat. The sight of it made my stomach twist, though I couldn't explain why. It was just a USB drive, after all. Suddenly, the screen cut to black. I leaned back in my chair, my heart pounding. The feed had been unnerving, but I was still convinced it was just some elaborate hoax. Then, my phone buzzed on the desk. I glanced down and froze. It was a text message from an unknown number. The message read, "Do you want to see more?" My hands trembled as I stared at the screen. How did they have my number? I hadn't given it to anyone, and I was using a VPN. Every precaution I'd taken suddenly felt like a joke. Against my better judgment, I replied with a single word, "Yes." Almost immediately, another link appeared in the chat. I stared at it for a long moment, debating whether to click it, but by now, I was too far down the rabbit hole to stop. The link took me to a new video feed. This time, the setting was different. It wasn't the basement anymore. Instead, the camera was inside what looked like a bedroom. The bed was neatly made. The walls were lined with bookshelves, and there was a large window with the curtains drawn. My heart sank when I realized the room looked familiar. Too familiar. It was my bedroom. The camera was positioned in the corner of the room, angled perfectly to capture everything. I spun around in my chair, half expecting to see the camera behind me. But the room was empty. My breath came in shallow gasps as I turned back to the screen. The feed was still live, showing my empty bedroom. Then, slowly, the camera began to pan. It moved toward the window, zooming in on the gap between the curtains. Something was there. A figure, barely visible in the darkness, stood just outside the window. It was motionless, its face obscured by the shadows. But as the camera zoomed closer, I saw it. The face was pale, featureless, like a blank mask with no eyes or mouth. My chest tightened as the figure raised a hand and pressed it against the glass. I could hear it now, a faint tapping, like fingernails rapping against the window pane. Without thinking, I grabbed my phone and called the police. The operator's voice was calm, but I could barely speak. I stumbled over my words, trying to explain what was happening. "We're sending someone to your location," the operator assured me. But as I hung up, the video feed changed again. This time, the camera was outside, pointed at the front door of my apartment building. The figure was there, standing perfectly still in the doorway. I bolted from my chair and locked every door and window in the apartment. My heart was racing, and my hands shook as I double-checked each lock. But when I returned to my computer, the feed was gone. In its place was a message. "You can't escape the channel." The next few hours were a blur. The police arrived and searched the area, but they found no sign of anyone outside my apartment. I showed them the video feed, but by then, the page had disappeared. They told me it was probably a prank, some kind of elaborate scare tactic. But I knew better. That night, I couldn't sleep. Every creak, every shadow felt like a threat. And though I tried to move on, to convince myself it was all a bad dream, I couldn't shake the feeling that I was being watched. Over the next few days, strange things began happening. My phone would buzz with messages from unknown numbers, each one containing cryptic phrases like, "We're still watching," or "The channel never ends." One night, I woke up to find my laptop open on my desk, the screen glowing faintly. I hadn't touched it since the incident, yet there it was, displaying a single sentence. "Join us again, Alex." I slammed the laptop shut and moved out of my apartment the next day. But no matter where I went, the messages followed. The whispers in the dark corners of the internet haunted me, pulling me closer to something I didn't understand. And now, I'm telling you this because I need you to know. If you ever see a link for Channel X, don't click it. No matter how curious you are, no matter how harmless it seems, don't give in. Because once you enter, you can never leave.